Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was a mortal who mastered Ultra Instinct and Beck. Aim an Angel, Naruto x Marcarita, Dragon Ball Super. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Whispering Void and the Mortal Spark. Silence was the last true god. It was a patient, methodical deity, and its dominion was absolute. It had consumed the cacophony of stars being born, the thunderous applause of supernovae, the vibrant hum of a billion lives, and the whispered prayers offered to lesser, forgotten gods. Now, all that remained of Universe 97b-Gamma was this final, stubborn pocket of existence, a single, shattered planetoid adrift in a sea of perfect, unending stillness. The silence here was a physical weight, a pressure on the skin and in the soul. It was a silence so profound it had its own sound, a low, resonant hum that was not a vibration in the air, for there was none, but a vibration in the very fabric of space-time, the last sigh of a murdered cosmos. On the surface of this cosmic tombstone, amidst a landscape of pulverized gray rock and crystalline dust that sparkled with the ghost light of dead suns, a figure sat cross-legged. His name was Naruto Uzumaki. Though the name meant nothing now, there was no one left to speak it, no one left to hear it. He was the last mortal, the final, flickering candle flame in a hurricane of entropy. His hair, once a defiant shock of sun-kissed blonde, was now muted by a permanent layer of fine, gray dust, as was his skin and the tattered remnants of the black and orange jumpsuit he still wore. More out of habit than a need for protection. He hadn't felt cold, or heat, or hunger in centuries. His body had adapted. He sat with his eyes closed, yet he saw everything. He didn't see with as optic nerves. They had long since ceased to matter. He perceived. He felt the slow, majestic pirouette of the planetoid as it tumbled through the void. He tasted the metallic tang of stray atoms, refugees from distant, long-dead galaxies. As they zipped past, he heard the whisper of gravitons, the silent song of the universe's underlying structure. His senses were no longer confined to the crude biological instruments of his birth. His awareness was a sphere, extending outwards for light years, a lonely lighthouse in an ocean of nothing. This was the gift, and the curse, of his unique state of being. The state his body had been forced to achieve to survive the apocalypse that had claimed everything else. The technique that the gods themselves struggled to master, a state of perfect harmony between mind and body. Of action without thought. Ultra instinct. For him, it had not been a glorious transformation unlocked in the heat of a climactic battle. There had been no tournaments, no divine mentors, no explosive surges of power marked by shifting hair colors. His ascension had been a slow, grueling crawl up a mountain of corpses. It had been born in the crucible of absolute despair, forged in the fires of a war that had escalated beyond all comprehension. The enemy had been a creeping, insidious nothingness, a wave of anti-existence that had simply erased. It didn't destroy, it unmade. Stars, planets, people, they hadn't exploded or died, they had just ceased to have ever been. He had watched his friends, his rivals, his entire world, fade like smoke, their last moments of terror dissolving into a blank canvas. He had only survived because, in that final moment, something within him had broken. The part of the mind that screamed, that feared, that despaired, it had shattered. And in its place, a profound calm had settled. His body, untethered from the anchor of conscious thought, had begun to move on its own. It had dodged the tendrils of erasure. It had sidestepped the waves of non-being. It had flowed like water around the jagged edges of reality's end. His body had fought for survival when his mind had already accepted death. Over the silent centuries that followed, he had honed this state. He hadn't known its name, only its nature. It was an emptying of the self, a surrender of intent. To think was to create a ripple, and the void hunted ripples. So, he learned not to think. He learned to simply be. His body became a perfect instrument, reacting to the subtle shifts in the void, finding the pockets of stability, the fleeting moments of existence where he could anchor himself. He fought entropy itself, not with punches or blasts of energy, but with stillness. He was a statue in the heart of a storm, and the storm, finding no resistance, passed him by. This constant, Passive battle had changed him. His mortal coil, his chakra, had been ground down and reforged into something else. It was no longer the boisterous, fiery energy of his youth. It was serene, silver, and silent, an energy that mirrored the void but was not of it. It was the quiet hum of existence, a stark contrast to the roar of oblivion. A flicker. It was not a sight, nor a sound, but a disturbance in the perfect symmetry of the silence. It was a discordant note in the grand, funereal symphony of his universe. Naruto's body, without a single command from his mind, shifted. The movement was not fast. It was merely instantaneous. One moment he was seated, the next he was standing, his back to the source of the disturbance. The gray dust cascaded from his form like water, revealing the surprisingly sharp lines of his orange and black attire, faded but intact. His eyes, a blue once as bright and defiant as a summer sky, remained closed. He didn't need them. The disturbance grew, coalescing trillions of miles away, yet as clear to his perception as if it were standing before him. It was an energy signature unlike anything he had ever encountered. It was not the raw, chaotic power of the tailed beasts, nor the refined, potent life force of a sage. It was orderly, impossibly, frighteningly orderly. It was the energy of creation, of structure, of laws so fundamental he made the laws of physics seem like mere suggestions. It was divine. The word bloomed in his quiet mind, a concept he hadn't considered in millennia. The source of this energy was traveling, not through space, but by bending space around it. It moved with a purpose and a grace that was utterly alien to the brutish, explosive methods of travel his own civilization had once developed. A moment later, the fabric of reality directly above his planetoid seemed to shimmer, like heat haze on an asphalt road. A perfect circle of iridescent light opened, a window into somewhere else, a somewhere filled with color and life and noise that felt like a physical assault to his heightened senses. From this window, a figure descended. Naruto's body tensed, every muscle fiber, every cell, humming with a silver aura that was visible only as a slight distortion in the space around him. His instincts, honed by eons of surviving the unsurvivable, screamed a single, silent word: threat. Not a malicious threat, not an enemy to be fought, but a threat in the way a tsunami is a threat to a sandcastle. This being was of such a higher order of existence that its mere presence could unravel him. It was a fundamental force of nature given form. She landed without a sound, her feet touching the gray dust with impossible lightness. The dust did not stir. She was tall and slender, with skin the color of a twilight sky, a gentle, ethereal blue. Her hair was stark white, pulled back into two impossibly long pigtails that seemed to defy gravity, floating slightly as if underwater. A golden halo, not of light but of solid, shimmering energy, floated behind her head, and she carried a long, dark staff topped with a floating blue orb. She wore an elegant, high-collared green and black uniform, adorned with orange and white diamonds. She was, by any mortal standard, breathtakingly beautiful. But Naruto didn't perceive beauty. He perceived power. He perceived the quiet, effortless perfection of her form. He perceived that she, too, was in a state of instinct. For beings like her, it was not a technique to be mastered, it was their natural state of existence. Their bodies and minds were one, always. How curious, the being said. Her voice was not a vibration of air, but a direct resonance in his mind. It was melodious, with a faint, musical echo, yet it held an undercurrent of authority that could command galaxies to stand still. My staff indicated a persistent spark of life in this erased timeline. A statistical impossibility. I had assumed it was a malfunctioning sensor. She took a step forward, her eyes, a serene, knowing purple, surveying the desolate landscape before settling on him. And yet, here you are. A mortal. To be precise, a Homo sapiens from the planet designated Earth 4 to 77 Gamma. Or what's left of it. Naruto remained silent, his body a perfectly coiled spring. His mind was a calm lake, observing the ripples her presence created. He noted the way she didn't breathe, the way the non-existent light seemed to bend around her, the way the fundamental constants of the universe seemed to hold their breath in her vicinity. He analyzed 10,000 possible attack vectors, defensive postures, and escape routes in the span of a single microsecond, all without a single conscious thought. This was what it meant to have mastered the physical self. The body knew what to do long before the mind could even formulate a question. The angel, for that was the only term his mind could conjure that fit, tilted her head. It was a gesture of genuine, academic curiosity, like a biologist discovering a new species of extremophile. You are radiating a divine energy, she continued, her mental voice laced with a hint of surprise. The Migata no Gokui, a feat no mortal has ever achieved on their own, let alone perfected to this degree. You are not merely using it, you are existing within it. It has become your natural state, much like our own. She tapped her long staff on the ground, and the blue orb at its top glowed softly. My name is Marcarita. I am the angel tasked with observing Universe 11. Though this is not my universe. This is a dead end, a timeline P. ruined by the Omni King for containing a fundamental paradox. It should be empty, utterly and completely devoid of anything. Tell me, mortal, how is it that you still exist? The question hung in the silence. It was the first direct query he had received in an age. He had almost forgotten how to form words. He let the question settle in his mind, examining it from all angles. She wasn't hostile. Her curiosity was genuine. The threat his body perceived was not from intent, but from the sheer, overwhelming gap in their power and nature. To her, he was a fascinating microbe. To him, she was the cosmos given a voice. He finally allowed his eyelids to flutter open. The blue of his irises was startlingly vivid against the gray backdrop of his world and skin. It was a spark of color in an otherwise monochromatic existence. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time in centuries, he chose to form a thought, to create a ripple. He chose to speak. I didn't die, Naruto said. His voice was rough, a gravelly whisper from disuse, yet it carried an unshakable core of certainty. It was the voice of someone who had stared into the abyss and hadn't blinked. I just refused. Marcarita's eyebrow, a delicate white arch, rose a fraction of a millimeter. That was the angelic equivalent of a jaw-dropping gasp. Mortals didn't refuse erasure by the Omni King. That was like a raindrop refusing to fall. The concept was so fundamentally alien, so ridiculously impossible, that it bordered on cosmic heresy. And yet, the evidence was standing right in front of her, a dusty, orange CL. Ad anomaly who spoke of defiance against absolute power as if it were a simple matter of stubbornness. Refused, she repeated, her mental voice now tinged with not just curiosity, but a nascent sense of something akin to awe. The will of the King of all is absolute. Its effects are woven into the very source code of reality. To refuse it would require a will stronger than existence itself. She took another step closer, her purple eyes scanning him with an intensity that felt as though it were peeling back the layers of his soul. The energy signature of the erasure that pruned this timeline is still faintly present. It's a clean cut. Nothing should have survived. Nothing. So, I will ask again. How? Naruto's gaze didn't waver. He had long since lost the brash, boastful nature of his youth. Confidence was no longer something he needed to project, it was simply the foundation of his being. It was the quiet, unshakable knowledge of his own capabilities, earned through trials no other being had ever faced. You said it yourself, he replied, his voice growing a little stronger, smoother. My body moves on its own. It learned to. When the end came, it wasn't a wave of energy to be blocked or an enemy to be punched. It was a rule. A new rule was declared. This universe does not exist. My body heard that rule, and it found a loophole. A loophole, Marcarita mused, a small, intrigued smile playing on her blue lips. The expression was subtle, yet it transformed her face from a mask of divine impassivity into something genuinely engaging. A loophole in absolute reality erasure. You speak of the impossible as if it were a clever trick. Explain. The erasure wave moved at the speed of thought. The king's thought. But my body doesn't operate at the speed of thought, Naruto explained. His hands slowly unclenching at his sides. He was beginning to relax, his body downgrading Marcarita from existential threat to overwhelmingly powerful but non-hostile variable. It moves at the speed of now. There is no gap between impulse and action. The wave was erasing the past and the future, unmaking the timeline. My body just stayed in the present. The perfect, infinitesimal, ever-moving slice of now. It didn't exist in the past that was being erased, and it didn't exist in the future that was being prevented. It just was. A man walking on a tightrope, and the rope is reality itself. And you're unmaking the rope behind and in front of him. As long as he doesn't fall, as long as he stays perfectly balanced in that one spot, he can keep walking. He gestured to the desolate world around him. The rest of my world, my friends, they thought. They feared. They remembered. That anchored them to the timeline that was being unmade. Their minds held them in place while the ground beneath them vanished. I survived because, in that moment, I had no mind. I had only instinct. My body just kept taking the next step on a path that no longer existed. Marcarita was silent for a long moment. She brought a delicate blue finger to her chin, her expression one of deep contemplation. The information her staff was feeding her confirmed his impossible story. His biological age was indeterminate, constantly fluctuating. His energy was self-sustaining, requiring no external input. He was a closed system, a perpetual motion machine of life, a living paradox. The angels, for all their power and knowledge, were beings of order and law. They were the enforcers of cosmic rules. This mortal had survived by finding a crack in the most fundamental rule of all. It was utterly fascinating, incredible. She finally breathed, her mental voice soft with wonder. To achieve such a perfect state of being through sheer desperation and willpower, without a teacher, without guidance. You didn't just learn to dodge attacks, mortal. You learned to dodge causality. You learned to dodge fate. Her gaze intensified again. What is your name? Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto Uzumaki, she repeated, tasting the name. The energy you wield, it's your own life force, isn't it? Refined by this process. You call it. I never called it anything. It was just me. In our lexicon, it would be called divine ki. It is the energy of the gods. You, a mortal, have generated it organically. She began to pace slowly, her movements so fluid they seemed to leave after images. This changes many things. It proves a hypothesis my father, the Grand Priest, has long held but never been able to prove, that the barrier between mortal and divine is not one of biology but of perception. That any being, with the correct state of mind, could theoretically touch the divine. Naruto watched her, his senses tracking her every minute movement, the slight shift in her energy, the subtle hum of the staff in her hand. He was processing information, learning. This, Grand Priest, her father, the Omni King, these were pieces of a puzzle he had never known existed. For eons, his world had been this single rock in the empty void. Now, a door had opened, revealing a cosmos teeming with hierarchies of power beyond his wildest imagination. So what now? Naruto asked, the first question he had asked about his own future in centuries. You're an angel from another universe. You found the bug in the system. Are you here to delete me? Marcarita stopped pacing and turned to face him fully. That small, intriguing smile returned. Delete you. Naruto Uzumaki, you are the most interesting thing to happen in the multiverse in the last 10 million years. Deleting you would be a tragic waste of a unique research opportunity. Her tone was playful, yet held the weight of absolute truth. The angels of the erased universes, they are put into a state of slumber until, or if, their universes are ever restored. But you are not an angel. You are not bound by our laws. You are a loose variable, a wild card, and I find that refreshing. She glided towards him, stopping just a few feet away. The sheer density of her divine presence was palpable, a gentle pressure that would have crushed a lesser being into dust. Naruto stood his ground, his own silver aura pushing back with a quiet, unyielding stubbornness. It was like a single, perfectly still stone holding its place against the tide of the entire ocean. You have a power that rivals that of a god of destruction, yet the serene heart of an angel. You have achieved through suffering what many of them fail to achieve through eons of training. You have no purpose, no home, no future. You are a king sitting on a throne of ash in a kingdom of one. She pointed her staff towards him, and the blue orb glowed brighter. I would like to make you an offer. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly. He remained in a state of perfect readiness. Oh, FFERS were for people who wanted something. He hadn't wanted anything for a very, very long time. Your existence here is an anomaly, and anomalies in the multiverse tend to attract unwanted attention, Marcarita explained. Her tone shifting to one of more serious counsel. There are beings older than the universes themselves. Beings of chaos and nothingness who prey on such cracks in reality. Quiet little kingdom of silence will not remain quiet forever. You need a purpose. And I have a vacancy. A vacancy for what? Naruto asked, his voice flat. A student, Marcarita declared, her purple eyes sparkling with excitement. And, potentially, something more. The laws of angels are strict. We are to guide and train our gods of destruction. We are to remain impartial. We are not to interfere. But the laws say nothing about taking on a mortal student who exists outside of the established cosmic framework. Especially one who has already mastered our most sacred technique. The idea was audacious, preposterous, even. An angel taking a mortal as a personal student. It was unheard of. It would shatter millennia of tradition. But Marcarita was not an angel who clung to tradition for its own sake. She was a seeker of knowledge, of potential. And in Naruto, she saw the ultimate potential. A being forged in the death of a universe, a mortal who had touched the face of God not by climbing a holy mountain, but by surviving the utter destruction of all things. Naruto considered her offer. Student. The word echoed in the lonely chambers of his memory. He had been a student once. And a teacher. He had been a friend. A son, a hero. Those concepts were like faded photographs, brittle with age. What could she possibly teach him? He had already achieved the ultimate state of being. As if reading his thoughts. Marcarita elaborated. You have perfected the state, Naruto Uzumaki. Your body is a flawless weapon of instinct. But you know nothing of its application. You are a master, swordsman who has only ever used his blade to deflect raindrops. I can teach you about ki. Divine ki. I can teach you about the multiverse, about the gods of destruction, about the kais, about the structure of reality itself. You have the engine of a god. I can teach you how to drive. She gestured with her staff to the swirling portal of light above them. Out there is a multiverse of 13 universes, teeming with life. With challenges, with fighters whose power could shatter planets with a flick of their finger. It is a far more interesting place to test your refusal than this silent grave. The faintest glimmer of something long dormant stirred within Naruto. Competition, purpose, a reason to be, other than simply being. He had been so focused on survival for so long that he had forgotten what it was to live. He had become a part of the silence, a feature of the desolate landscape. Marcarita was offering him a way out. A way back into the grand, chaotic, vibrant dance of life. But with it came risk. He was safe here in his void. He was the undisputed master of his tiny domain. Out there, he would be a nobody again. A strange mortal with a strange power in a cosmos full of gods and monsters. The old Naruto, the brash and reckless knucklehead, would have jumped at the chance without a second thought. This Naruto, the one tempered by millennia of solitude and silence, was more cautious. And what do you get out of this? He asked, his blue eyes searching hers for the angle, the catch. Marcarita's smile widened, becoming a genuine, dazzling expression of delight. I get to watch. I get to learn. You, Naruto Uzumaki, are a living refutation of everything we thought we knew. Studying your development, your interaction with the established cosmos, it will be the most fascinating experiment in creation. And besides, she added, her voice dropping to a near whisper, her eyes gleaming with a mischievous light, my god of destruction in Universe 11, Lord Belmont, has become rather lazy. He thinks his pride troopers can handle everything. Perhaps seeing a mortal who has mastered a technique that he himself still struggles with might provide him with some much-needed motivation. The logic was sound. From her perspective, he was a perfect catalyst. A stone to be thrown into the placid lake of the divine hierarchy to see what ripples it made. For him, it was a chance. A chance to be more than just a survivor. A chance to find a new purpose. The silence of his universe was no longer a comfort, it was a prison. He had only just realized it. He had stared into the void for so long. And for the first time, someone from beyond the void was staring back. He took a deep breath, the first conscious breath he had taken in centuries. The act itself felt foreign, strange. He looked down at his hands, covered in the gray dust of his dead world. Then he looked back up at the celestial being before him, at the portal of swirling light and color she had opened. It was a choice. Stay and be the god of nothing, or leave and be a student in a universe of everything. The old Naruto, buried deep beneath the layers of silence and time, made the decision for him. It was never really a choice at all. All right, Naruto said, his voice firm, resolute. You've got yourself a student, Marcarita-sensei. A flicker of genuine surprise crossed Marcarita's face at the honorific, quickly followed by a pleased, almost smug, satisfaction. An excellent decision, Naruto-kun. I believe this will be a most illuminating partnership. She tapped her staff again, and the iridescent. Chapter 2. The Anvil of Asgardia and the Valkyrie's Challenge. The transition was not a journey, it was a redefinition of being. One moment, Naruto stood on the silent, gray dust of his cosmic tombstone, the next. He was somewhere else entirely. The concept of travel, of moving from point A to point B, was a mortal limitation that did not apply to Marcarita's staff. It simply excised them from one coordinate in reality and pasted them into another. The initial sensation was not one of movement, but of vertigo, as if the entire universe had pivoted around him while he remained motionless. He instinctively fell into a defensive stance, his body reacting to the sudden, violent shift in the fundamental constants of his environment. His senses, honed to detect the subtlest whisper of a graviton in a dead cosmos, were suddenly and brutally assaulted. He was standing on a balcony of what felt like polished obsidian, so smooth and cool it seemed to hum against the soles of his boots. The air, there was air, was thick with unfamiliar scents. The sharp, clean tang of ozone, the sweet, heavy perfume of 1,000 unknown blossoms, and a faint, underlying metallic scent, like a freshly sharpened blade. But it was the sound that nearly brought him to his knees. After millennia of a silence so profound it had become a sound in itself, the sudden influx of auditory information was a physical blow. There was the gentle, chiming music of crystalline wind chimes stirred by a soft breeze. There was the distant, melodic roar of a waterfall. There was the hum of something. A low, powerful, or dirly thrum of energy that permeated everything, a stark contrast to the chaotic, screaming energies of his old world. His body, in its state of perfect instinct, immediately began to process and filter the overwhelming data. But the conscious part of his mind, the ghost of Naruto Uzumaki, was reeling. It was like a man who had been deaf his entire life suddenly being granted perfect hearing in the middle of a symphony orchestra. This is my personal domain, Marcarita's mental voice echoed, now tinged with a soft amusement at his disorientation. A small pocket dimension I maintain for observation and quiet contemplation. It is shielded from most forms of scrying and is a suitable first stop for your reacclimation. Naruto slowly, deliberately, forced his body to relax. He opened his eyes, and the assault on his senses intensified. He was in a sprawling, elegant pagoda that floated in a sea of soft, white clouds. The structure was a masterpiece of impossible architecture, with grace. Fully curving roofs and delicate latticework, all seemingly carved from a single piece of jade. Below the clouds, he could see the swirling, purple and blue nebulae of Universe 11, a vista of such breathtaking beauty it felt like a direct refutation of the gray void he had called home. The sky above was not dark, but a gentle, ever-shifting tapestry of pastel colors. Everything was serene, ordered, and perfect. It was the antithesis of his entire existence. It's loud, Naruto managed, his voice still a rough whisper. Is it? Marcarita replied, genuinely surprised. I find it rather peaceful. But I suppose, compared to the absolute zero of your prior residence, any stimulus would seem cacophonous. She glided to his side, her long staff held loosely in one hand. Your body is adjusting well. Your energy signature is stabilizing, drawing from the ambient life force of this universe. You were a closed system before. Now, you are beginning to connect to the wider network of existence. It is a crucial first step. He turned to look at her. In this new, vibrant light, her blue skin seemed to glow with an inner luminescence, and her purple eyes held a depth that seemed to contain all the stars he now saw before him. You said you would teach me. Where do we begin? We begin by understanding the nature of your power, she said, her tone shifting from hostess to instructor. You have achieved the pinnacle of martial arts, the state of ultra instinct. But you have only ever used its defensive aspect, the sign. Your body reacts and evades threats on its own. This is because your mind, for all intents and purposes, was shut down. You were pure reflex. But to truly wield this power, to use it as a weapon, you must learn to merge your consciousness with that instinct. You must be able to form an intent, the intent to strike, to attack, without letting that thought disrupt the perfect flow of your body. This is the true, mastered form of Ultra Instinct. It is the state where the silver-haired angels reside. Naruto listened, absorbing the information. It made perfect sense. Attacking required a decision, a target, a goal. All of those things were products of the conscious mind. The very thing he had suppressed for millennia to survive. Every time he had been forced to act in his old universe, it had been a reaction, to catch a piece of falling debris, to shift his weight on the unstable planetoid. He had never initiated an action. The greatest challenge for the gods and mortals who have briefly touched this power is the sheer difficulty of silencing their thoughts in the heat of battle. Marcarita continued, beginning to pace the obsidian balcony. Their rage, their pride, their desperation, it creates static that disrupts the signal between body and instinct. You, however, have the opposite problem. Your mind is too quiet. You have spent an eternity in a state of perfect zen, a state of non-thought. Now, you must learn to introduce a single, perfect thought. The thought of combat, into that serene emptiness without shattering it. You must learn to be the calm eye in the raging storm simultaneously. And how do I learn that? Naruto asked. A genuinely excited, almost predatory smile graced Marcarita's lips. By finding you a suitable sparring partner, of course. Someone powerful enough to force you to attack. Someone whose pride and martial prowess will not allow for a simple passive defense. She tapped her staff, and the blue orb at its top glowed, projecting a swirling, three-dimensional image in the air between them. It was a planet, wreathed in a golden aura, with continents that looked like they had been forged rather than formed. This is Asgardia, a warrior world. They are the most boisterous and physically powerful mortals in Universe 11. They value strength, honor, and glorious combat above all else. Their entire culture is an anvil, designed to forge the greatest warriors. It is the perfect place to test your mettle. And it is ruled by a woman who has never refused a challenge in her life. The staff's hum shifted, and the portal of iridescent light opened once more, this time leading not to the gray void, but to a place of thunderous noise and blinding light. Naruto steeled himself, took a breath scented with alien flowers, and stepped through. The sensory assault of Marcarita's domain was a gentle whisper compared to the full-throated, heavy metal roar of Asgardia. The air was thick and heavy, smelling of ozone, roasted meat the size of boulders, and a sweet, fermented beverage that stung the nostrils. The sky was a brilliant, burnished gold, and instead of a sun, a colossal, swirling vortex of cosmic energy hung overhead, bathing the world in a perpetual, glorious dawn. They stood on one end of a vast, shimmering bridge, a rainbow of solid light that stretched across a chasm so deep that clouds formed and dissipated within its depths. At the other end of the bridge stood a city of impossible scale. It wasn't built so much as it was forged, a collection of towering, golden citadels and colossal fortresses that scraped the golden sky, all adorned with intricate, angular carvings of epic battles and monstrous beasts. The sound was everywhere, the clash of steel on steel, the roar of warriors in training, the bellowing laughter that seemed to shake the very foundations of the city, and a deep, resonant chanting that was half battle cry, half hymn. Naruto saw figures in the distance, clad in ornate, horned armor, wrestling with creatures that looked like bipedal dragons, their struggles shaking the ground. This was not a world of peace or contemplation. This was a world locked in a perpetual, joyous state of glorious struggle. It was as alive and vibrant as Naruto's former home had been dead and silent. It was a world that shouted its own existence from every golden rooftop. As they proceeded across the rainbow bridge, Naruto's senses, now fully recalibrated, began to pick apart the symphony of stimuli. The bridge hummed with a tangible energy, a steady flow of power that he could feel in the soles of his feet. He realized it wasn't just light, it was a conduit, channeling the raw SMIC energy from the vortex above into the heart of the city. The warriors he saw were not merely strong, their life forces, their ki, burned with a golden intensity that was wild and untamed, yet powerful. They fought with a joyous ferocity, their laughter booming even as they exchanged blows that would pulverize mountains. This wasn't combat born of hatred or desperation. It was a form of communication. A celebration of life and strength. They were halfway across the bridge when two figures blocked their path. They were women, at least 8 feet tall, clad in magnificent, winged silver armor that seemed to be forged from starlight. They held massive halberds that crackled with contained lightning. Their faces were stern, beautiful, and utterly implacable. They moved in perfect unison, landing the butts of their halberds on the bridge with a thunderous crack that sent shimmers of energy across its surface. "Halt!" the one on the left commanded, her voice a clear, powerful alto that carried easily over the din of the city. "None may approach the citadel of valor without leave. State your names and purpose." Marcarita didn't even slow her graceful glide. "That will not be necessary, Lyra," she said, her mental voice washing over the four of them with serene authority. The Valkyrie guards stiffened, their eyes widening in shock and recognition. "I am here to see your queen." Two warriors instantly fell to one knee, bowing their heads in a gesture of profound respect that bordered on worship. The transition from intimidating sentinels to deferential subjects was instantaneous. "Lady Marcarita," the one named Lyra exclaimed, her voice now filled with awe. "Forgive our insolence. We did not sense your approach." "I intended it as such," Marcarita replied kindly. "You may rise. Your vigilance is commendable." She gestured with her staff towards Naruto. "This is Naruto Uzumaki. He is with me." The Valkyries rose, their stern gazes falling upon Naruto. They scanned him from head to toe, their expressions a mixture of confusion and professional assessment. They saw a mortal of average height, clad in dusty, strange orange and black clothes, with no visible weapon or armor. His energy was odd. It was profoundly calm, almost non-existent, yet they could feel an unsettling depth to it, like looking into a perfectly still lake and sensing a leviathan sleeping in its abyssal depths. They could not reconcile the angel's patronage with the man's unassuming appearance. But it was not their place to question an angel. They stepped aside, their halberds held in a salute, and cleared the path. Marcarita led Naruto past them and into the city proper. The scale of the architecture was even more overwhelming up close. The streets were vast causeways wide enough for giants to march abreast. And the buildings were monuments to battle, their walls carved with reliefs of legendary heroes battling cosmic serpents and frost giants. The air itself seemed to thrum with a palpable sense of pride and power. They were not met by anyone else as they proceeded towards the largest citadel, a towering spire of gold and obsidian that seemed to hold the sky vortex aloft. It was clear that Marcarita's presence commanded a level of respect that granted her unimpeded passage anywhere she wished to go. They entered the great hall of the citadel, and the sensory input intensified tenfold. The chamber was a cavernous expanse, its ceiling so high it was lost in shadow, held up by colossal pillars carved in the likeness of ancient kings and queens. The walls were adorned not with tapestries, but with the preserved heads of colossal beasts and the shattered weapons of conquered foes. Long feasting tables, scarred and stained from centuries of revelry, lined the hall, and warriors drank from massive horns, their laughter echoing like thunder. At the center of the hall was a sunken, circular pit, its floor of packed earth stained dark from countless duels. And in that pit, a battle was reaching its climax. On one side stood a Jotun, a frost giant from the frozen moons of Niflheim. It was a 20-foot-tall behemoth of blue-gray ice and rock, wielding a club that was an entire petrified tree. Its roars were blasts of freezing wind, and its every step cracked the very ground. On the other side, a single warrior stood against it. A woman. She was tall, even for an Asgardian, with a cascade of fiery red hair braided with golden rings that fell down her back. Her armor was a masterpiece of gleaming gold and dark iron, sculpted to her athletic form, with a cape of crimson fabric that seemed to drink the light. In her hands, she wielded a colossal greatsword, its blade a shimmering, translucent crystal that hummed with a high, clear note. She moved with a terrifying blend of grace and brutality. She didn't meet the giant's overwhelming strength with her own, she redirected it. She flowed around the clumsy swings of its club, her movements economical and precise, using the flat of her crystalline blade to parry blows that should have shattered it, angling them so the giant's own momentum sent it stumbling. The assembled warriors roared their approval, not at the spectacle of power, but at the demonstration of superior skill. You have grown slow in your exile, Rimthers, the woman's voice boomed, clear and commanding, laced with a warrior's arrogance. Your ice is brittle, and your rage is artless. The Jotun bellowed in fury and charged, bringing its club down in a devastating overhead smash. The woman didn't retreat. She planted her feet, spun, and met the attack with an upward slash. Crystal met petrified wood. There was no clang of metal, but a sound like a cathedral bell being struck, a pure, resonant tone that vibrated in Naruto's very bones. For a moment, the two forces were locked. Then, with a cry of exertion, the woman channeled a surge of her own golden ki into her blade. The crystal sword glowed with the intensity of a star, and with a deafening crack, the giant's club shattered into a million splinters. The woman didn't pause. She continued her spin, her momentum carrying her forward, and brought the flat of her glow blade down on the giant's head in a single, decisive blow. The Jotun's eyes rolled back, and it collapsed to the ground, unconscious but, Naruto noted, alive. The great hall erupted in a deafening roar of approval. The warriors hammered their fists on the tables and stomped their feet, a thunderous ovation for their victorious leader. The woman stood over her fallen foe, chest heaving slightly, the glow from her sword fading. She planted its tip into the ground and rested her hands on the pommel, surveying her cheering subjects with an expression of fierce pride. This was Helena, the Valkyrie Prime, Queen of Asgardia. She finally looked up, her gaze sweeping across the hall, and her sharp, emerald green eyes locked onto Marcarita. A slow, wolfish grin spread across her face. Marcarita, she bellowed, her voice easily cutting through the din. The hall fell silent at the mention of the angel's name. It has been too long. Have you finally grown tired of watching your pampered god O.F. Destruction play with his costumed heroes? Have you come to witness true combat? She vaulted out of the fighting pit with impossible ease, landing lightly on the polished floor and striding towards them. Her greatsword now held casually over her shoulder. Greetings, Helena, Marcarita replied, her mental voice a stark contrast to the Valkyrie's booming speech. Your prowess in battle remains as impressive as ever. A fine demonstration of skill over brute force. Helena laughed, a hearty, genuine sound. Praise from an angel. I am honored. Her eyes then fell on Naruto, standing silently beside Marcarita. Her grin faded, replaced by a look of dismissive curiosity. She circled him like a predator examining strange prey, her emerald eyes taking in his dusty clothes, his calm demeanor, and the strange, placid energy he radiated. And what is this? She asked, her tone dripping with condescension. You've brought me a pet. A refugee from some fallen world. He has the stink of the void on him. Naruto met her gaze without flinching. His body remained perfectly relaxed, yet every fiber was ready. He could feel the raw, explosive power radiating from Helena. She was a furnace of golden ki. A stark contrast to Marcarita's calm, bottomless ocean of divine energy. She was chaos and fire, where the angel was order and serenity. This is Naruto Uzumaki, Marcarita explained, a hint of playful provocation in her voice. He is my new student, and I believe he possesses a unique set of skills that might interest you. Helena stopped circling and stood before Naruto, looking down at him from her superior height. She scoffed, your student, an angel training a mortal, and this one, he looks as though a stiff breeze would knock him over. What skills could he possibly possess? The ability to gather dust. The warriors in the hall chuckled, their laughter echoing their queen's dismissive attitude. They were a people who judged by what they could see, muscle, armor, weapons, and the burning intensity of a warrior's spirit. Naruto displayed none of these things. He just seemed still. It was a stillness they mistook for weakness. Naruto's expression did not change. His mind was a placid lake, and her insults were mere pebbles, causing the faintest of ripples before vanishing. He had faced the unmaking of all things. The pride of a mortal queen, however powerful, was not something that could stir him. He simply met her arrogant gaze and spoke, his voice quiet yet carrying a strange resonance that cut through the cavernous hall. I was told, he said, that the Queen of Asgardia has never refused a challenge. The hall fell silent again. The warriors stared, stunned by the mortal's audacity. Helena's emerald eyes narrowed, the condescending amusement replaced by a dangerous glint. No one spoke to her like that. No one challenged her so plainly, so calmly, in her own throne room. "You have a serpent's tongue in your head, little mortal," Helena said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous purr. She leaned in closer, the sheer force of her personality a physical pressure. "And a fool's courage. A challenge. You wish to challenge me. In what? A staring contest. Contest of who can stand still the longest. A spar," Naruto replied, his tone unchanged. "As your angel sensei suggested. She wishes for me to learn how to attack. I require a partner who can force my hand." The sheer, unadulterated confidence of the statement, delivered in such a calm, unassuming manner, took Helena aback. He wasn't boasting. He wasn't posturing. He was stating it as a simple fact. "I require a partner who can force my hand." The implication was clear. Most could not. For a mortal to imply that he was superior to the warriors of Asgardia, to her champions, was the height of arrogance. But his eyes, there was no arrogance in them. Only a quiet, absolute certainty. Helena stared at him for a long moment, the silence stretching taut. Then, she threw her head back and laughed. It was not a gentle laugh. It was a roar, a peal of thunder that shook the rafters. The warriors, seeing their queen's reaction, joined in, their derisive laughter filling the hall. Marcarita simply watched, a knowing smile on her lips. "I like this one," Helena finally boomed, wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. "His audacity is almost as vast as the great void itself." "Very well, mortal." Naruto Uzumaki. "I, Helena, the Valkyrie Prime, Queen of Asgardia, and the Blade of Universe 11, accept your challenge." She spun around, pointing her crystalline sword towards the main gates. "But not here. This pit is for settling squabbles and teaching lessons. A challenge for the throne's honor must be held in the proving grounds. Let the world bear witness to your courage, and your folly." She marched towards the exit, her crimson cape billowing behind her. The warriors in the hall, their moods shifting from mockery to feverish excitement, scrambled to follow, their earlier jeers turning into a roaring chant of their queen's name. A challenge was a sacred event, and this one, between their invincible queen and a mysterious mortal backed by an angel, promised to be a spectacle for the ages. Naruto watched them go, his expression still unreadable. "Are you certain about this, Naruto-kun?" Marcarita asked, her mental voice the only sound in the now emptying hall. She will not hold back. Her pride will not allow it. To her, this is a matter of personal and national honor. Naruto turned his head slightly, the ghost of a smile touching his lips for the first time since his arrival. It was a small, subtle thing. But it changed his entire face, hinting at the charismatic leader he had once been. "You wanted me to learn how to form an intent to attack," he said, his voice a low whisper. "Standing here, feeling the energy of this place, of her, I believe the intent is beginning to form." He then turned and followed the roaring crowd towards his first true test in a new reality, leaving Marcarita alone in the great hall. The angel watched him go, her smile widening. The stone had been cast. Now, she would watch the ripples. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Proving Grounds and the Valkyries Dance. The Proving Grounds of Asgardia were not a mere arena. They were a testament to the world's philosophy, a sculpted embodiment of glorious, unending struggle. It was a vast, circular chasm, miles in diameter. Its sheer obsidian walls plunging into a misty, cloud-filled abyss. There was no floor. Instead, a constellation of massive, hexagonal basalt platforms floated at varying heights, connected by shimmering bridges of hard light that flickered in and out of existence on a randomized sequence. Gravity here felt heavier, the air crackled with a raw, ambient energy that made the hairs on one's arms stand up. And the golden sky vortex above seemed to churn with a hungrier intensity. This was a place where warriors were not just tested, they were forged, or they were broken. Tens of thousands of Asgardian warriors filled colossal amphitheaters carved directly into the chasm's rim. Their combined presence was a physical force, a tidal wave of anticipation and bloodlust. Their roaring chants of He-Lana, He-Lana, were not just sound. They were percussive blasts of ki, a collective war cry that echoed off the floating stones and shook the very air. They were a choir of battle, and their hymn was for their queen. At the edge of a ceremonial platform that jutted out over the chasm, Helena stood, her back to Naruto. She had shed her crimson cape, and two attendants were fitting a final piece of armor onto her. A golden helm, fashioned in the shape of a hawk with its wings swept back. She held her crystalline greatsword, the Galdra blade, before her, its tip resting on the obsidian floor. Her eyes were closed, her breathing slow and deep. The arrogant, boisterous queen from the great hall was gone, replaced by a being of pure, lethal focus. The wild furnace of her. He was no longer radiating outwards in a display of pride, it was being drawn inward, compressed, refined into a dense, white-hot core of combat energy. She was not preparing for a spectacle, she was preparing for a war. Marcarita observed from a private, floating dais high above, a perfect picture of serene detachment. Beside her stood a grizzled old Asgardian with a braided white beard that reached his belt. His face a roadmap of 1,000 battle scars. This was Bor, the warden of the proving grounds and Helena's former weapons master. "My lady angel," Bor rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. He did not take his one good eye off his queen. "You honor us, but I do not understand this. You bring a lamb to the lioness's den. Her pride is at stake. She will not be merciful. She will make this quick, but it will not be clean." Quote, "Your concern for the lamb is noted, Warden Bor," Marcarita's voice replied in his mind, smooth as polished jade. "But you mistake the nature of the creatures before you. Tell me, what is your queen's greatest strength?" "Her strength is her greatest strength." Bor snorted. "She can shatter a moon with a single, focused blow. Her speed can outpace a comet. But her true gift, it is the Hamingja. The battle luck. The battlefield itself bends to her will. The light bridges will form beneath her feet and vanish beneath her enemies. The stones will offer her purchase and crumble for her foe. She does not merely fight her opponent, she fights the entire world on their behalf. The boy stands no chance." A fascinating ability, Marcarita mused, a flicker of genuine interest in her eyes. "Let us see how it fares against an opponent for whom concepts like luck are irrelevant." Down below, Naruto stood where he had been left, a small, still figure in range and black amidst the epic grandeur of the arena and the roaring crowd. He did not stretch. He did not assume a stance. He did not power up. He simply watched Helena, his blue eyes calm and analytical. He was a rock in the center of a raging river, his silence a stark, defiant contrast to the overwhelming noise. To the Asgardians, he looked terrified, frozen in place. They could not comprehend a stillness that was not born of fear. Helena finished her ritual. She opened her eyes, and they burned with emerald fire. She turned, her movements sharp and precise, and leveled her Galdra blade at Naruto. "Mortal," she declared, her voice amplified by the arena's strange acoustics, silencing the entire crowd in an instant. "You sought a challenge, and the heavens themselves will bear witness to my answer. There are no rules here save one. The battle ends when I declare it so. Do you have any last words?" Naruto's response was not a shout. It was spoken in his normal, quiet voice, yet every single warrior in the stadium heard it as clearly as if he had whispered it in their ear. "No." The single, calm syllable was more insulting than any boast. It was the ultimate dismissal. Helena's lips tightened into a thin line. The time for words was over. With a final, piercing battle cry that was answered by the roar of her people, she launched herself into the air. She did not leap. She exploded. The obsidian platform beneath her feet cracked and splintered from the sheer force of her departure. She crossed the 100-yard gap between them in less than a heartbeat, a golden comet of righteous fury. Her Galdra blade held high for a single, definitive, cleaving blow. The crowd roared, expecting a bloody and immediate conclusion. The blade came down. It was a strike of absolute finality, imbued with enough force to split the very platform Naruto stood upon. It moved faster than sight, a blur of golden light and crystalline steel. It was a perfect, inescapable attack. And it met nothing but air. Naruto was no longer there. There was no burst of speed, no flicker of movement the eye could track. At the last possible nanosecond, his body had, without any conscious input, simply shifted. He tilted his torso a few inches to the left, his right foot pivoting slightly. The Galdra blade passed by his head so closely that it sheared off a few strands of his dusty blonde hair, which vaporized in the blade's energy field. The force of the swing carved a deep, molten gouge in the basalt platform, sending a spray of incandescent rock into the abyss. Helena's eyes widened in disbelief. She was perfectly balanced, her warrior's training allowing her to flow from the mist strike into a vicious, horizontal slash aimed at his midsection. Again, the result was the same. Naruto's back arched, his body bending at an impossible angle, and the blade hissed through the space where his spine had been a moment before. He hadn't dodged, he had simply ceased to be in the path of the attack. It was as if he knew the trajectory of her strike before her own muscles did. The crowd's roar faltered, replaced by a confused murmur. Bor, the warden, leaned forward on his dais, his one good eye wide with shock. "What sorcery is this?" Quote, "No sorcery, warden," Marcarita's voice echoed in his mind. "Purity." Helena let out a frustrated growl and unleashed a relentless flurry of attacks. Slashes, thrusts, cleaves, pommel strikes, a whirlwind of martial artistry that would have overwhelmed a dozen master swordsmen. She was a hurricane of golden fury, her Galdra blade a continuous blur of lethal light. And Naruto was the eye of the storm. He flowed. There was no other word for it. He never took a step back, never created distance. He stayed within her guard, in the most dangerous possible position, and moved with a liquid, effortless grace. His body twisted, turned, ducked, and weaved, each movement minimal, precise, and perfect. He was a leaf on the wind, a stream flowing around a rock. He never blocked, never parried. He simply wasn't there for any of her strikes to land. His expression remained utterly placid, his blue eyes half-lidded, as if he were in a deep trance. To the roaring crowd, it was a bizarre, frustrating dance. It looked as if their queen was fighting a ghost. "Stand and fight, you coward!" Helena roared, her frustration boiling over. She leapt back, creating distance, and thrust her sword forward. A wave of golden energy, a crescent of pure force, erupted from the blade and shot towards Naruto. It was too wide to dodge, too fast to evade. The energy wave high, the platform and detonated with the force of a tactical nuke. The entire basalt hexagon shattered, its fragments falling into the misty abyss. The crowd gasped, many thinking the fight was over. But as the smoke cleared, they saw him. Naruto was now standing on a different platform 50 feet away, untouched. A hard light bridge had flickered into existence for the split second he needed to cross it. A bridge that hadn't been there a moment before. Helena stared, her chest heaving. This was her Hammingja, her battle luck, betraying her. The battlefield was supposed to aid her. Impossible, she snarled. From his dais, Bor gasped. The bridge, it appeared for the boy. The proving grounds are helping him. The proving grounds are a crucible of combat, are they not? Marcarita replied calmly. They do not favor the strong. They favor the superior warrior. And right now, the arena recognizes a level of martial perfection it has never witnessed before. This realization struck Helena like a physical blow. The arena, her arena, saw this strange, passive mortal as her superior. Her fury, already a roaring inferno, escalated into a supernova. "If you will not stand and fight, then I will leave you no ground to stand on," she bellowed. She raised her Galdra blade to the sky. The golden vortex above seemed to answer her call. A column of brilliant, searing light descended from it and struck her sword, which glowed with an almost unbearable intensity. Her own ki flared, her red hair whipping around her like flames. She was tapping into the very power source of her world. Valkyrie's judgment, she screamed. She plunged her sword into the platform she stood on. It was not an attack directed at Naruto, it was an attack on the battlefield itself. A shockwave of golden energy erupted outwards, not in a single wave, but in a complex, three-dimensional lattice of destructive force. It struck every floating platform simultaneously. The basalt hexagons began to crumble and disintegrate. The hard light bridges sputtered and died. The entire arena was coming apart, a cataclysmic, unavoidable attack designed to annihilate everything within the chasm. Naruto stood on his crumbling platform, watching the web of golden energy close in from every conceivable angle. He could feel it now. The end. His body, his instincts, screamed at him that evasion was no longer possible. There was nowhere to dodge, nowhere to run. The only path to survival was forward. The only way to stop the wave was to stop its source. And deep within the serene lake of his mind, a thought finally formed. It was not a chaotic ripple of fear or desperation. It was a single, perfect, crystalline idea, as pure and as focused as the heart of a star. Strike. The thought did not shatter his calm. It became his calm, his consciousness, his will, which had been a passive observer for millennia, finally merged with the flawless instinct of his body. The disconnect between mind and self vanished. The watcher became the actor. A silver aura, so bright it was almost white, exploded into existence around him. It was not a wild, fiery aura like Helena's. It was serene, silent, and radiated a cold, ethereal light. It pushed back against the encroaching golden energy, a bubble of perfect order in a sea of chaos. His head, which had been slightly bowed, lifted. He opened his eyes, and they were no longer blue. They were the color of molten silver, deep and ancient, and they held an intensity that dwarfed the sun. This was no longer the defensive sign. This was the offensive truth. The mastered form. The Asgardians fell silent, their roars dying in their throats. The sheer pressure radiating from Naruto, the divine weight of his new presence, was suffocating. Even Helena, at the center of her own storm, felt a tremor of pure, primal fear. Naruto moved. He did not run. He did not leap. He simply stepped off his disintegrating platform and into the path of a roaring energy beam. The beam did not touch him. It parted around his silver aura as if he were a holy icon, a fundamental law of reality to which destruction itself had to yield. He took another step, then another, walking through the maelstrom of Helena's ultimate attack as if it were a gentle spring rain. He was not dodging. He was simply immune. His existence, his state of being, was on a higher plane than her attack. He closed the 500 yards that separated them in 3 seconds, his movements an elegant, terrifying, and utterly incomprehensible display of perfection. The raging storm of Valkyrie's judgment was merely the backdrop to his serene, inexorable advance. He appeared before her. She was still locked in her attack, her sword plunged into the rock, her body a conduit for cosmic power. Her emerald eyes were wide with a terror that had replaced her fury. She tried to pull her sword free, to defend herself, but she was too slow. She was moving in mortal time. He was moving in the time of now. He did not throw a punch. He did not launch an energy blast. He simply raised his right hand, his fingers held together in a gentle chop. The movement was economical, almost lazy, yet it contained the weight of a concept. The absolute certainty of its outcome. He brought his hand down and gently, almost tenderly, tapped the side of her neck. The effect was absolute. The column of light from the sky vortex shattered. The web of golden energy filling the chasm vanished as if it had never been. The Galdra blade's brilliant glow died, returning to a simple, translucent crystal. The white-hot furnace of Helena's key was not just extinguished. It was disconnected. Her connection to her own power, to the battlefield, to the very sky above, was severed with that single, precise touch. The breath left her lungs in a ragged gasp. The strength fled her limbs. Her eyes, wide with shocked comprehension, rolled back in her head. Her sword slipped from her grasp, clattering onto the crumbling rock. Her body, deprived of its divine energy and warrior's will, went limp and began to fall. Naruto caught her easily, pulling her back from the edge of the dissolving platform. He held the unconscious queen in his arms for a moment, then gently laid her down on the last stable piece of rock. His silver aura faded, his eyes returning to their normal, placid blue. He stood over her, his expression unreadable, his objective complete. Absolute, deafening silence reigned in the proving grounds. The tens of thousands of Asgardian warriors, who had never seen their queen so much as take a single step back in battle, stared in stunned, uncomprehending disbelief. Their invincible leader, the blade of their universe, had been utterly and completely defeated. She hadn't been overpowered. She had been dismantled. She had unleashed the power of a star, and he had turned it off with a touch. Marcarita's form shimmered into existence beside Naruto, her staff silent, her expression one of profound, academic satisfaction. She looked down at the unconscious form of Helena, then up at the mortal who had defeated her. An excellent first lesson, Naruto-kun, she said, her voice the only sound in the vast, silent chasm. Seems you have found the spark of your intent. Naruto looked at his own hand, then back at the defeated queen. A complex emotion, one he hadn't felt in an eternity, flickered in his eyes. It was not pride. It was not arrogance. It was the quiet, heavy, and deeply familiar weight of overwhelming power, and the responsibility that came with it. He was no longer just a survivor. He was a force to be reckoned with in a universe he was only just beginning to understand. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Neon Shadows of Shinski and the Kunoichi's Ghost. The aftermath of victory was not a celebration, it was a return to silence. After the stunned capitulation of Asgardia and a brief, intensely analytical debriefing from Marcarita, Naruto had requested a return to her pocket dimension. The cheers of the Asgardians, which had quickly morphed from stunned horror to zealous worship of his power, had been more unsettling to him than their earlier derision. Power was a tool, a means of survival. He had forgotten it could also be a spectacle, a source of fear and fealty. He had forgotten the weight of being watched. He now sat on the edge of the Jade Pagoda, his legs dangling over the sea of soft clouds. The purple nebulae of Universe 11 his only audience. The silence here was different from the silence of his dead universe. That had been an empty, oppressive silence, the sound of nothing. This was a peaceful silence. The sound of serenity. It was filled with the gentle hum of Marcarita's ambient energy, the whisper of cosmic dust passing light years away. It was the silence of a library, not a tomb. He replayed the fight with Helena in his mind, not the physical movements, but the internal shift. For the first time in millennia, he had chosen to act. He had imposed his will upon another being. The sensation was like a phantom limb beginning to ache. The ghost of Naruto Uzumaki, the shinobi, the leader, the hero, was stirring within the vessel of the silent survivor. The fight had not just reawakened his intent. It had reawakened his memory. He remembered the thrill of battle, the sharp focus of a life or death struggle, the heavy responsibility of protecting others. These W.E. feelings he had thought were ground to dust along with the rest of his world. As he sifted through these resurrected memories, a new sensation pricked at the edge of his perception. It was not a sound or a sight. It was a feeling, a resonance deep within the core of his being. It was faint, distant, and distorted, like a familiar song heard through miles of water, but it was unmistakably there. It was the echo of chakra, not the raw, wild key of the Asgardians, nor the perfectly ordered divine energy of Marcarita. It was the familiar, nuanced energy of his own people, the blend of physical and spiritual power that had defined his old world. But this echo was wrong. It was thin, frayed, and laced with a desperate, screaming agony. It was the feeling of a single, flickering candle flame trying not to be extinguished in a hurricane. It was the feeling of utter, crushing loneliness. He knew that feeling. He had been its sole inhabitant for an age. Naruto-kun, Marcarita's mental voice intruded, gentle yet precise. Your energy is fluctuating. It is exhibiting a sympathetic resonance with an unknown source. This is a new development. Please describe the sensation. Naruto didn't turn. He kept his gaze fixed on the distant stars. It's a thread, he said, his voice quiet. A connection. I feel someone like I used to be. They are in pain. They are alone. And they are fighting. Marcarita materialized beside him, her staff silent in her hand. She closed her eyes, her angelic senses extending outwards, trying to pinpoint the source of the disturbance Naruto was feeling. Fascinating, she mused after a moment. I feel nothing. This is not a detectable energy signature on any known divine spectrum. It seems to be a connection unique to you, a form of spiritual empathy tied to your origins. Your very soul is acting as a receiver. She tilted her head, her purple eyes alight with academic curiosity. Where is this thread leading you? Naruto closed his own eyes, focusing inward, following the faint, agonizing pull. He traced its path across the cosmic web, through the folds of space-time, to a different universe entirely. A universe shrouded in shadow and sorrow. It's dark there, he whispered. And wet. A world of steel and glass and endless rain. There is a ghost. A ghost fighting a machine. He opened his eyes, the placid blue now holding a flicker of ancient fire. Take me there. Marcarita smiled. The experiment was yielding unexpected and delightful results. As my student wishes, she said, and tapped her staff. The world of jade and clouds dissolved into a vortex of iridescent light. The transition was a brutal violation. They were ejected from the serene perfection of Marcarita's domain into a world that was actively trying to drown them. A cold, unnaturally heavy rain fell in relentless sheets, not from clouds, but from the perpetually light-polluted, ink-black sky where towering skyscrapers, monolithic and oppressive, clawed at a heaven that had long since been forgotten. They stood in a narrow alley, the grimy walls slick with moisture and plastered with peeling, holographic advertisements that flickered with a desperate, predatory cheerfulness. The air was thick with the smells of recycled water, ozone, and steaming noodles from a nearby street vendor. The only light came from the garish, oversaturated neon signs that painted the falling rain in shifting hues of electric pink, sickly green, and corporate blue. The sound was a constant, deafening roar, the hiss of the rain, the hum of flying vehicles passing overhead, the distant scream of sirens, and the inescapable, bass-heavy thrum of synthesized music blasting from 1,000 hidden speakers. This was Shinski, the new world. The source of the resonance is close, Naruto stated, his voice flat. He seemed unaffected by the sensory onslaught, his body already adapting, filtering the noise, analyzing the composition of the rain. His gaze was fixed on the mouth of the alley. It's about to get closer. As he spoke, a cacophony of heavy, rhythmic stomping echoed from the main street. A squad of 6 figures entered the alley, their forms bulky and intimidating. They were not human. They were machines, 7-foot-tall automatons fashioned in the image of samurai, their armor a polished, chrome-plated mockery of feudal design. Their faces were blank steel plates from which a single, glowing red optic lens scanned the darkness. They carried massive, high-frequency vibro katanas that hummed with a lethal energy. On their pauldrons was a stylized logo, A.S. Ilver droplet of rain with a 9-pointed star within it. A Megaker Dynamics. Target's bio-signature is present. In this sector, one of the machines droned, its voice a synthesized, emotionless baritone. Unit designation: Karasu. Threat level: Omega. Standing corporate directive: terminate with extreme prejudice. Deploying suppressive fire pattern. The alleys on both sides of the street suddenly erupted with the harsh, percussive sound of heavy-caliber automated turrets. Streams of incandescent tracer rounds filled the air, ricocheting off the grimy walls with explosive force, turning the aerospace into a blender of shrapnel and superheated plasma. Marcarita raised a delicate hand and a sphere of serene, blue energy enveloped her and Naruto, deflecting the incoming projectiles with soft, musical chimes. She observed the scene with detached curiosity, like a scientist watching bacteria under a microscope. Naruto's eyes, however, were not on the machines or the turrets. They were fixed on the rooftops. He had felt it. A flicker of movement. A whisper of displaced air. The ghost. A shadow detached itself from the rooftop opposite them. It was a figure, small and impossibly agile, clad in form-fitting black stealth gear that seemed to drink the neon light. A featureless, white porcelain mask, adorned with simple red lines that resembled tears, concealed its face. The figure moved with a liquid grace that was both beautiful and terrifying, a stark contrast to the clunky, methodical movements of the machines. It flowed down the side of the building, not falling, but running. Its feet finding purchase on surfaces a normal human could not. Halfway down, it kicked off, twisting in midair, a black cloak flaring out like the wings of a crow. In that instant, time seemed to slow for Naruto. He saw the intricate web of chakra threads the figure deployed from its fingertips, latching onto the machines below. He saw the subtle shift of its weight, the coiling of its muscles for a devastating attack. He recognized the style, the efficiency, the perfect economy of motion. It was the way of the shinobi, a way he hadn't seen since the end of his world. The figure, Karasu, descended into the alley like a vengeful spirit. Before the machines could retarget, she was upon them. 2 short, black blades, kodachis that hummed with a faint, purple energy, appeared in her hands. She landed on the shoulders of one automaton, her movements silent and precise. A quick, cross-body slash with her blades, and the machine's head flew from its shoulders in a shower of sparks. She used its falling body as a springboard, launching herself towards the next. She moved not like a warrior, but like a surgeon, her blades targeting the unarmored joints, the hydraulic lines, the central processing units. Each movement was a killing blow. In less than 5 seconds, 5 of the 6 samurai bots lay in pieces on the wet alley floor, their red optics fading to black. The last one raised its vibro katana, its programming finally catching up to the blur of motion. But Karasu was already there. She slid beneath its clumsy swing, one hand planting on the ground as she swiveled, her OT. Her hand driving a kodachi upwards through the machine's chin and into its cranial wiring. It froze, shuddered, and collapsed. The automated turrets, their programming unable to track a target moving with such speed, ceased their fire. The sudden silence was broken only by the hiss of the rain and the crackle of dying machinery. Karasu stood in the center of the mechanical carnage, her head cocked to the side as she surveyed her work. Her chest rose and fell with controlled, even breaths. The thread of pain and loneliness Naruto had felt was now a roaring bonfire in his senses. He could feel her exhaustion, the bone-deep weariness hidden beneath the flawless execution. He could feel the centuries of grief she carried, a burden that would have crushed a lesser soul. Karasu slowly turned her head, her masked gaze fixing on the 2 figures standing untouched at the end of the alley. Her body, which had been a fluid instrument of death, instantly tensed, coiling like a serpent ready to strike. She had not sensed them. In her world, to be unsensed was to be an impossibly high-level threat. Marcarita simply observed, her head tilted with mild interest. The local lifeforms were proving to be surprisingly entertaining. It was Naruto who moved. He took a single, slow step forward out of the protective sphere. "Easy," he said, his voice quiet yet carrying easily through the rain. "We're not with them." He gestured to the wreckage of the Omegaker Dynamics squad. Karasu's posture did not relax. If anything, it became more rigid. The purple energy around her kodachis intensified. "Identify yourselves," she commanded. Her voice, filtered through her mask's modulator, was a cold, synthesized monotone, devoid of all emotion. Yet Naruto could feel the tremor of suspicion and fear behind it. "No one enters the undersprawl without a reason. State yours or be eliminated." "My reason," Naruto said, his gaze locked onto her masked face, "is you." He took another step. "I felt you. Your chakra. It's familiar. And it's in pain." At the word, chakra, Karasu flinched. It was a minute, almost imperceptible reaction, but Naruto's senses missed nothing. The word was ancient, almost forgotten in this world of cybernetics and corporate warfare. Only a handful of people still even knew what it meant. "My designation is Karasu," she stated, her synthesized voice betraying no emotion. "I am a corporate asset gone rogue. That is all you need to know. This is your final warning. Leave this sector now. Your designation is Karasu," Naruto repeated softly. The Crow, a fitting name for a shinobi of the Hidden Leaf. This time, her reaction was anything but subtle. Her entire body jerked as if struck by lightning. Her grip on her blades tightened until her knuckles were white. The cold, robotic facade shattered for a split second, and Naruto felt a wave of pure, undiluted shock and terror emanate from her. How do you know that name?" she whispered, her real voice, a strained, youthful alto, leaking through the modulator. "Because I knew another shinobi from the Hidden Leaf. A long time ago," Naruto said, a profound sadness touching his features. "He wore a mask, too. Though his was a dog. He saw it then. A memory, not his own, but hers, projected by the sheer force of her emotion. A flash of a silver-haired man in a green flak jacket, his gentle, one-eyed gaze full of warmth. Kakashi." The name echoed in the space between them. "Who? What are you?" Karasu breathed, taking an involuntary step back. She had been fighting this war for so long, a lonely ghost haunting the neon-drenched canyons of this corporate dystopia. She had believed herself to be the last. The very last practitioner of the old ways, the last soul to remember the feel of a tree under her feet or the warmth of an unfiltered sun. And now this man, this stranger with the sad, ancient eyes and the impossible calm, spoke of her home as if it were yesterday. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki," he said, and the name, which had meant nothing to the Queen of Asgardia, was a key that unlocked a floodgate of disbelief and impossible hope in the heart of the last kunoichi. He took one final step, stopping just a few feet from her. "And I think we're the last 2 leaves on a tree that fell a long, long time ago." He reached out his hand, not in aggression, but in a gesture of profound, shared understanding. A gesture that said, "You are not alone anymore." Karasu stared at his outstretched hand, then back at his face. Her blades, which had been extensions of her own body, clattered to the wet alley floor. Their purple glow fading. Her shoulders, which had carried the weight of her solitary war for decades, began to tremble. Slowly, hesitantly, she raised a shaking hand and removed her white porcelain mask. The face beneath was young, far younger than the weariness in her soul suggested. She had sharp, intelligent features, framed by a cascade of straight, jet-black hair, plastered to her skin by the rain. But it was her eyes that held Naruto's attention. They were a deep, dark onyx, and within them, he saw it all. The fall of the elemental nations to the corporate machine of Omegakure dynamics. The systematic hunting and extermination of the shinobi clans. The desperate fight to preserve a culture, a way of life, in a world that had traded it for chrome and neon. He saw the ghosts of her comrades, her family, her sensei, and he saw the crushing, absolute loneliness of being the sole survivor. Her eyes were a mirror of his own past. A single tear, indistinguishable from the rain, traced a path down her cheek. "My name," she whispered, her voice cracking with a pain that had been suppressed for a lifetime, "is Kiyomi. Kiyomi Uchiha." Naruto's gentle smile was the first ray of genuine warmth she had seen in a lifetime. In the heart of the cold, cruel, neon city, a ghost had found a fellow spirit, and for the first time in a very long time, the rain did not feel quite so cold. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Chorus of Creation and the Songstress's Plea. The Jade Pagoda existed outside of time. In the neon-drenched hell of Shinseki, hours had bled into a frantic day of data theft, system sabotage, and a carefully orchestrated exodus for the handful of resistance fighters Kiyomi had protected. But here, in Marcarita's pocket dimension, it was a single, eternal moment of peace. The soft, white clouds drifted in a placid sea below, and the purple nebulae of Universe 11 painted the non-existent sky with strokes of divine light. Kiyomi sat by a small, bubbling spring that emerged from the jade floor, its water clear as liquid crystal. She had removed the black tactical gear, which now lay in a neat pile beside her. She wore a simple, gray tunic provided by Marcarita, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she was unarmed. Her hands, which had known nothing but the cold grip of a kodachi or the sleek interface of a hacking console, rested awkwardly in her lap. She was watching her own reflection in the water, but the face that stared back was a stranger's. The grime was gone, the perpetual tension around her eyes had eased, but the hollowness remained. She was a ghost trying to remember how to be a person. Naruto sat a few feet away, not looking at her, but giving her the space she needed. He held a single, perfect leaf that had drifted down from one of the pagoda's impossible trees. He was focused on it, not with his eyes, but with his ki. He was tracing the delicate, intricate network of life within it, feeling the slow, patient journey of water through its veins. It was an exercise in connection, in refamiliarizing himself with the feeling of life after an eternity of its absence. "They are safe," he said quietly, his verses OICE a gentle counterpoint to the spring's soft bubbling. "Marcarita has relocated the data core and your resistance cell to a neutral planetoid in the outer rim. Omegakure Dynamics will hunt for ghosts. TS for a decade before they realize their entire network has been compromised." Kiyomi didn't look up from her reflection. "Safety is a temporary state. They will be found. The corporation is a hydra. You cut off one head, and two more, armed with better tracking algorithms and deadlier hunter-killer units, take its place." Her voice was flat, a statement of fact learned through years of bloody experience. "Perhaps," Naruto conceded, "but for now, they can breathe. They can rest. Sometimes, that's the only victory you can ask for." She finally turned her head, her dark onyx eyes fixing on him. Why did you help? You are not from that world. Their fight is not yours." "I told you," he said, his gaze still on the leaf. "I know what it is to be the last one. I know the weight you carry. No one should have to carry it alone." He finally looked at her, and his blue eyes were filled with a profound empathy that bypassed her decades of emotional armor. "I couldn't save my world, Kiyomi. But I was there when you needed help saving what was left of yours. That's a better reason than most I've had. A flicker of something. Gratitude. Confusion, a painful, unfamiliar warmth, crossed her face before she quickly suppressed it. Turning back to the water. Akunoichi did not show weakness. Akunoichi did not trust kindness. But the seed of his words had been planted in the barren soil of her soul. Marcarita materialized between them, her appearance as silent and effortless as a thought. She was not smiling. Her brow, for the first time since Naruto had met her, was furrowed with a delicate, celestial concern. The staff in her hand was humming, not with its usual serene energy, but with a discordant, worried thrum. "A problem has arisen," she announced, her mental voice crisp and devoid of its usual playful undertones. "A significant, and highly anomalous, cosmic event." Naruto and Kiyomi were on their feet in an instant, their peaceful postures replaced by the coiled readiness of warriors. Kiyomi's hands instinctively went to where her blades should have been. "What is it?" Naruto asked. "A god of destruction on a rampage. An inter-universal invasion. Worse," Marcarita stated, her purple eyes grave. "This is not an addition of hostile energy. It is a subtraction of existence itself." She tapped her staff, and the air before them shimmered, coalescing into a three-dimensional map of the known multiverse, a cluster of 13 shimmering, egg-like universes. Within one of them, a tiny, black pinprick had appeared. It was a spot of perfect, absolute nothingness. A null energy event, a hole, has been punched in the fabric of reality. The fundamental laws of physics, the very song of creation, are ceasing to function in that specific coordinate. And it is spreading. Naruto stared at the black spot. A cold, familiar dread washing over him. "Erasure," he whispered. "Of a kind," Marcarita corrected, her expression grim. "The Omni King's erasure is an instantaneous, absolute act of will. A clean deletion. This is different. It is slow, insidious. It is like a metaphysical cancer, and its cells are perfect, orderly voids. It is unmaking reality, one quantum vibration at a time." Kiyomi stared at the map, her analytical mind grappling with a concept that defied all logic. "Where is the epicenter? A realm that does not technically exist within the physical constraints of Universe 7. Marcarita explained, her staff's hum guiding her. "It is a higher dimensional plane of being, a place of pure concept. It is known to the Kais as the celestial spheres. It is said to be the place where the primordial music of creation still echoes. And right now, that music is being silenced." She looked at Naruto, her gaze sharp and intense. "This feels connected to you, to the nature of how you survived. We must investigate." She tapped her staff, and the jade pagoda dissolved. The journey was unlike the others. It was not an instantaneous shift. They moved through layers, peeling back the skin of reality. They passed through the physical universe of stars and planets, then through a realm of swirling, chaotic energies where ideas and emotions took on tangible form. Naruto could feel the brush of a billion dreams, the cold touch of countless fears. Kiyomi gritted her teeth, her shinobi discipline the only thing keeping her sane in the face of such raw, conceptual chaos. Finally, they broke through one last barrier and arrived. They stood on what appeared to be a floating island of solid, amethyst light. The ground beneath their feet vibrated with a gentle, harmonious chord. There was no sky, no horizon, only an infinite, luminous space filled with a symphony of light and color. Rivers of liquid melody, shimmering with every hue imaginable, flowed through the void. Continents of crystallized sound, each resonating with its own unique tonal frequency, drifted like celestial bodies. The very air, if it could be called that, was music. It was a place of breathtaking, transcendent beauty, but something was terribly wrong. Naruto felt it instantly, a dissonance in the harmony, a sour note in the perfect chorus. Kiyomi, with her heightened senses, could hear it. A faint, yet jarring, silence that was not an absence of sound, but an active, aggressive presence that seemed to consume the music around it. They looked out into the luminous void and saw them, patches of blackness, like the one on Marcarita's map. They were holes in the world, areas where the light, color, and music simply stopped. And around the edges of these holes, the rivers of melody seemed to fray and die, the continents of crystallized sound crumbling into silent dust. "This is a world made of sound," Kiyomi breathed, her voice filled with a reverence she hadn't known she possessed. "It is the resonance of life itself," Marcarita confirmed, her staff held tightly. And it is dying. A feeling, a desperate, sorrowful plea within the universal song, guided them forward. They moved through the ethereal landscape, their forms gliding over bridges of pure harmony, towards the heart of the realm. It was a vast, pulsating sphere of iridescent light, the source of the grandest melody. The sun of this musical cosmos. But even from a distance, they could see it was faltering. Its light flickered, and its song was strained, like a beautiful voice trying to hold a note while being choked. As they drew closer, they saw her. A being at the center of the sphere, her form not quite solid, a humanoid shape woven from threads of light and sound. She had long, flowing hair of pure white light and eyes that were twin notes of a sorrowful blue melody. Her hands were outstretched, palms facing outwards, as if physically holding back the encroaching paw. TCHES of silence that threatened to consume her and her world. This was Arya, the songstress of the celestial spheres. Her song was weakening, her light was dimming. She was the final barrier against the end of her reality. She turned her sorrowful gaze towards them, and her voice was not spoken, but felt, a melody of despair that resonated directly in their souls. Strangers, you have come to the end of all things. You must flee. The silence is coming. It consumes all. There is nothing to fight. There is only the ceasing of the song. Marcarita stepped forward, her divine presence a shield against the palpable despair. We are not here to flee, songstress, her mental voice rang out, a clear, authoritative bell in the discordant air. We are here to understand. Arya's luminous form flickered. Understand. One does not understand the end of a note. It simply is not. This is the silence, an entropy of existence. It unravels the song of creation. For eons, I have sung the chorus of life, reinforcing the melody of what is. But the silence is a stronger harmony. It is the perfect, simple chord of nothingness. My song grows weak. My world fades. It was then that her gaze fell upon Naruto. Her sorrowful blue eyes widened. The music of her being, which had been a dirge, suddenly shifted, a single, high, clear note of impossible hope cutting through the despair. You, she breathed, the word a symphony of shock and awe. What are you? The silence, it flows around you. It does not touch you. Your soul, it sings a note that does not belong to the chorus of creation. It is a song of one. A solitary verse in a silent universe. Naruto met her gaze. He could feel her struggle, her essence being unmade by the same force he had defied for centuries. He stepped past Marcarita, walking to the edge of the luminous platform, directly before the faltering songstress and the encroaching void. My song ended a long time ago, he said, his voice imbued with the quiet authority of one who had seen the end. I'm what was left after the music stopped. He closed his eyes. He didn't need to see the silence, he could feel it. It was the same texture, the same cold, orderly presence of the erasure that had claimed his home. This was its nature, its truest form. Not a wave of destructive energy, but a quiet, patient, and absolute unmaking. He let go. He slipped back into that state of perfect being, the world of instinct. The serene, silver aura of mastered ultra instinct bloomed around him, silent and majestic. It did not push back the silence with force. It simply existed. Arya watched, her light form trembling. Marcarita observed with an intensity that bordered on reverence. Kiyomi held her breath, feeling the shift in reality around Naruto, a calm so profound it seemed to bend the very fabric of the musical realm. Naruto raised his hand, not to attack, but to feel. He extended his silver key, his serene life force, outwards, until it touched the edge of the nearest patch of blackness. The moment his energy made contact with the void, something extraordinary happened. There was no explosion, no violent reaction. Instead, a sound emerged. A single, pure, resonant note. Like a perfectly struck silver bell. It was the sound of Naruto's own life force, his own will to exist, given voice in this conceptual realm. The silence, the perfect harmony of nothingness, could not absorb this note. It was an anomaly, a paradox. The note did not belong to the grand song of creation that it was programmed to unravel. It was a foreign concept, a piece of rogue data in its perfect code of non-existence. The encroaching edge of the void halted. It did not retreat, but it ceased to advance where Naruto's energy touched it. His single, solitary note had created a buffer, a demarcation line between is and is not. For the first time in an age, a small part of Arya's realm was not actively dying. The silence had been given a counterpoint. Arya's luminous form surged with renewed strength. Hope, a force more powerful than any melody, flooded through her being. Her sorrowful eyes, now fixed on the silver-glowing man before her, shone with a light that was no longer just music, but pure, unadulterated adoration. She saw not a warrior, but a miracle. The one song the void could not silence. You, she sang, her voice now a powerful, soaring aria of hope. You were the verse that was never written. The answer to the silence. Kiyomi watched, her hand resting on the place her heart was, a heart that was beginning to feel things she had long thought dead. She understood then that the greatest threats were not corporations or machines, but the quiet voids that threatened to consume the soul. Marcarita's mind raced, connecting the pieces. This silence, this slow erasure, and her impossible student, a mortal who had mastered the ultimate divine state and was uniquely immune to the unmaking of reality. This was no coincidence. The multiverse was facing a threat that the gods might not even be able to perceive, and the only hope, the only possible counter, was this dusty, quiet man from a dead and forgotten universe. The experiment had just become the key to everything. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Whispers of Entropy and the First Strike. The single, silver note of Naruto's existence hung in the conceptual space, a defiant island of sound in an encroaching sea of silence. It was not a victory. It was a stalemate, a finger plugging a hole in a dam that was cracking in 1,000 places. Arya's luminous form, no longer actively being unmade, had solidified, her light brighter. Her song of hope a fragile but beautiful melody that pushed back against the encroaching despair. Kiyomi stood with a hand on the hilt of a phantom blade, her analytical eyes scanning the edges of the voids. Cataloging the enemy, processing its nature. This was not a foe you could stab, not a system you could hack. It was the universe's error code, threatening to delete everything. Your state of being, your Migata no Gokui, it acts as an ontological anchor. Marcarita's voice was a torrent of rapid-fire analysis in their minds. The silence, this, entropy, functions by erasing the reason for a thing to exist. It convinces reality to forget itself. But your existence is no longer predicated on cause and effect. You simply are. Your being is a self-contained, axiomatic truth. The silence cannot process you. It is a logical paradox it cannot resolve. So I can stop it, Naruto stated, his silver aura holding steady, the silent note of his ki a constant, unwavering presence. You can halt it, Marcarita corrected, a fine distinction that carried the weight of a grim prognosis. Where you are present, it cannot advance. But you are one man, Naruto-kun. And this realm is infinite. As she spoke, her staff pulsed with an urgent, crimson light. Her head snapped up, her gaze no longer focused on the celestial spheres, but looking outwards, at the grander tapestry of the cosmos. And this is not the only front. Her words hung in the musical air like a dissonant chord. What do you mean? Kiyomi asked, her voice sharp. While you have been anchoring this primary incursion point, my staff has detected dozens of similar, smaller null energy events, Marcarita explained, her calm cracking to reveal a deep, divine urgency. They are appearing randomly across the material universes. A fishing planet in Universe 4 has lost its ocean. A star nursery in Universe 2 has gone dark. A single, tiny, hole, has appeared in the antechamber of Lord Zeno's palace itself. It is a coordinated, multi-front assault by an enemy that does not travel, but simply, arrives. The scale of the threat crashed down on them. They were not fighting a battle for a single, conceptual realm. They were fighting a war for existence itself, and they had only just realized it had begun. This is not a task for one, Marcarita declared, her decision made. Your unique ability is our only counter, Naruto-kun. But you cannot be everywhere at once. You are the shield, but we need swords. We need artillery. We need a Valkyrie. She didn't wait for a response. She tapped her street AFF on the amethyst light of the platform, and the familiar iridescent portal tore open beside her. The sounds that spilled out were not the serene melodies of the celestial spheres, but the roar of a training arena, the clang of steel. And a booming, furious voice shouting, again. Harder. Do you call that a strike? My grandmother knits with more force. A figure was unceremoniously pulled through the portal, stumbling for a moment before catching her balance with a warrior's grace. It was Helena. She was clad in black training leathers, her fiery red hair tied back in a simple, functional tail, her face slick with sweat. Her golden Galdra blade was in her hand, and she looked utterly furious at the interruption. Marcarita, what is the meaning of this? I was in the middle of breaking in the new captain of my vanguard. Her eyes blazed with indignation, which faltered for a split second as they fell upon Naruto. A complex storm of emotions washed over her face, the sting of her defeat, a grudging respect, and an undeniable flicker of excitement. Her gaze then swept over the impossible landscape, the rivers of melody, the crumbling continents of sound, and the terrifying, silent voids. Her warrior's mind, accustomed to tangible threats, struggled to process the sight. By the All-Father's beard, what is this place? This, Queen Helena, is our war, Naruto said, his voice calm, pulling her focus. His silver aura remained, a beacon of serenity in the chaotic beauty of the dying realm. War. Helena's eyes narrowed, her battle instincts taking over. Against what? There are no armies, no fleets. There is only quiet. She looked at the voids, and a primal shudder ran through her. It was a warrior's worst nightmare, an enemy you could not fight, a foe that offered no glorious struggle, only the meek, silent end of all things. The quiet is the enemy, Kiyomi stated, stepping forward. Her dark eyes met Helena's fiery green ones. It was a meeting of two utterly different philosophies, the patient, precise shadow and the glorious, incandescent flame. It unmakes things, permanently. Marcarita raised her staff, its light projecting a tactical map into the air. It showed Arya's realm, the central sphere of light, and the numerous black voids eating away at it. The songstress, Arya, is the nexus of this realm. Her song holds it together. The silence is targeting the keystones of her symphony. The chords that form the foundation of this reality. If they fall, the entire realm will collapse, and the resulting paradox could unravel Universe 7 from the inside out. Arya's voice, stronger now, resonated within all their minds. The angel is correct. The silent ones are attacking the great harmonies. I can feel them, 3 of them, beginning to fray. The chord of G minor, which governs the flow of melodic rivers. The resonance of the crimson major, which solidifies the very ground beneath us. And the crescendo of the first dawn, the heart of my own power. A 3-front battle, Kiyomi analyzed instantly. We'll have to split our forces. An excellent tactical assessment, Miss Uchiha, Marcarita approved. Helena, your raw power, the Hamingja, is a force of pure, glorious existence. While you cannot destroy the silence, you can obliterate the corrupted matter and sound at its edges. You can create firebreaks. You will be our artillery. Go to the resonance of the crimson major. Do what you do best. Hold the line with overwhelming force. A feral grin spread across Helena's face. An enemy she couldn't punch was frustrating. But a command to unleash her full power to hold a line. That was a language she understood. A glorious death or a grand victory. The bards of Asgardia will sing of this day. With a roar, she launched herself into the musical void. A golden comet aimed at a crumbling continent of sound in the distance. Kiyomi, Marcarita continued, your skills are in precision. In sealing. The chord of G minor is not a place, but a concept, a flow. Helena's raw power would be wasted there. You must use your chakra, a power alien to this realm, to weave a net. Create a filter. We cannot stop the river from flowing into the void, but perhaps you can slow the corrosion. Kiyomi nodded once, a flicker of understanding in her dark eyes. Sealing arts were designed to contain uncontrollable forces. This was just a larger, more conceptual application. She vanished in a swirl of black feathers, a silent crow flying towards a river of dying light. Arya, you must focus all of your remaining power on reinforcing the crescendo of the first dawn, Marcarita commanded. It is the heart of this world and your own. You are the last line of defense. Arya's luminous form bowed. It shall be as you say. My song will not fail. And you, Naruto-kun. Marcarita turned to him, her expression a mixture of profound reliance and analytical concern. You are our keystone. The breaches are too numerous for you to plug them all. You must be mobile. You must move between the 3 fronts, reinforcing the point that is closest to collapse. You are not holding one line, you are holding them all. Do you understand the strain this will put on you? To maintain this state while moving, while actively projecting your energy, it is a feat no being has ever attempted. I understand, Naruto said. And he did. He had to be the calm eye of 3 different storms, simultaneously. He looked out at the dying, beautiful world. He saw the golden comet of Helena's ki clashing with the edges of a void. He saw the subtle, purple threads of Kiyomi's chakra beginning to weave a complex net across a river of fading light. He heard Arya's song swell, a desperate, defiant anthem against the dying of the light. They were all fighting. He was no longer alone in the silence. With a thought, he was gone, his form a silent, silver streak crossing the conceptual sky. The battle was a symphony of beautiful, terrifying chaos. On the crumbling continent of the Crimson Major, Helena was a goddess of war. She stood on a peak of crystallized music, her Galdrablade a blur of golden light. For Asgardia, she roared, and unleashed her Valkyrie's judgment not as a focused beam, but as a wide, sweeping arc of destructive energy. It carved a massive trench in the crystalline ground, creating a molten moat of scorched sound between her and the encroaching void. The silence consumed the energy, but its advance over the physical medium was halted. She was buying them time with raw, untamed power. At the court of G minor, Kiyomi was a phantom artist. She moved with impossible speed along the banks of the melodic river, her hands weaving signs that were ancient poetry. Chakra-infused paper seals, the last relics of her world, slapped onto the very air, linked by threads of purple energy. She was not building a dam, but a complex filtration system, a spiritual net that forced the essence of the silence to unspool, to lose its coherence, before it see old poisoned the river further downstream. It was a delicate, draining work of immense precision. At the heart of the realm, Arya sang. Her light blazed, her voice a tangible force of creation, reinforcing the fracturing foundations of her world, her entire being focused on holding back the primary breach that threatened to consume her. Naruto became the fulcrum upon which the entire battle balanced. He appeared beside Helena, his silver aura flaring, planting an ontological anchor of his own ki that solidified a crumbling cliff face, allowing her to hold her ground. Then, in the next instant, he was at the river. His serene energy flowing into Kiyomi's chakra web, reinforcing the seals that were beginning to overload and fray. His presence was a calming, fortifying force, a universal constant in an equation of chaos. He was not fighting. He was enabling the others to fight. But the silence was not a passive force. It learned. It adapted. From the heart of the largest voids, formless tendrils of pure anti-existence began to lash out. They were not fast, but they were inexorable. One such tendril snaked towards Kiyomi as she was focused on weaving a particularly complex seal. Kiyomi, left flank. Helena's roar echoed across the realm, a warning from her own battlefront. Kiyomi spun, her kodachis in her hands, but the tendril was too close. It didn't radiate heat or cold or energy. It just was a finger of absolute nothing that would erase her from all history. She prepared for the end, her face a mask of grim acceptance. A flash of silver. Naruto was there, standing between her and the tendril. He did not block it. He simply held out his hand. The tendril of nothingness touched his palm, and instead of erasing him, it seemed to recoil, to dissolve, its perfect order Ly void disrupted by his paradoxical existence. It unraveled into harmless, silent dust. He didn't look at her. His silver eyes were already scanning the other fronts. Stay focused, was all he said. Before vanishing again to reinforce Arya's position, Kiyomi stared at the space where he had been, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had been saved, not by a jutsu, not by a tool, but by the simple fact of his being. The ghost who had felt her loneliness had now stood between her and utter oblivion. The battle raged for an eternity, for a single moment. Finally, with a great, coordinated push, they achieved a new equilibrium. Helena's firebreak was holding, a molten scar of defiance. Kiyomi's chakra net had stabilized the river's flow, the corruption slowed to a near standstill. And Arya, reinforced by Naruto's final intervention, had successfully shored up the defenses of her central core. The voids were still there, vast and terrifying, but they were no longer advancing. The song of the celestial spheres. though scarred and weakened, was still being sung. They gathered back on the central amethyst platform, exhausted but victorious. Helena leaned on her greatsword, her golden key flickering with fatigue. Kiyomi was on one knee, breathing heavily, the strain of weaving so much chakra visible on her face. Arya's light was dimmer, but stable. Naruto's silver aura had faded, his posture unchanged. But the depth of the stillness around him spoke of an immense expenditure of will. It was Marcarita who broke the silence, her form shimmering back into existence, her face a mask of grim reality. "You have succeeded," her voice echoed in their minds. "You have stabilized Universe 7's conceptual reality. A feat that should have been impossible." A weary, triumphant grin touched Helena's lips. "Then the war is won." Quote, "No," Marcarita said, and the single word was colder and more terrifying than any of the voids they had just faced. "The war has just been announced." Her staff projected the map of the multiverse into the air again. But now, it was peppered with hundreds of tiny, black pinpricks. They had been so focused on this one, critical battle, that they hadn't seen the bigger picture. "While you fought for this realm," Marcarita explained, her voice devoid of all emotion, "dozens of minor incursions have successfully concluded. A minor god of paperwork in Universe 3 has ceased to exist. The Dragon Balls of Namek in Universe 6 have turned to stone. The time nest that governs all of history has a single, non-erasable dead spot in it. They were feints, sacrific, IAL attacks designed to measure the responses of the divine. And no one responded, because no one else can even perceive the threat." She looked at the four of them, a weary angel looking at her four, impossible soldiers. "They know we're here now. They know there is a resistance. What you did here today, you did not win a battle. You just rang the bell for the main event." Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Council of Angels and the Mortals Stand. The journey to the Omni King's palace was not a journey through space, but a traversal of divine hierarchy. Marcarita's staff did not open a simple portal, it requested clearance. A series of ethereal chimes echoed through the void, answered by a cascade of deeper, more resonant tones, like galactic bells acknowledging a formal summons. The very I see of reality seemed to thrum with a palpable sense of occasion and immense, ancient power. For Naruto, Helena, and Kiyomi, the sensation was profoundly unnerving. They were ascending to a level of essence where they were not just out of their league, they were a different species of thought entirely. They emerged not in a room, but in an antechamber of impossible scale and design. It was a vast, circular hall with no visible ceiling or walls, only an endless expanse of shimmering, pearlescent light that seemed to pulse with a gentle, cosmic heartbeat. The floor was a polished, milky white SUV stance that felt both solid and intangible, and scattered across it were what looked like colossal, floating chess pieces, each one a miniature galaxy swirling with nascent stars. The air hummed with a power so pure and so absolute that it made the divine energy of the celestial spheres feel like a candle flame next to a supernova. This was the nexus of all creation, the place from which the will of the King of all flowed outwards to govern the multiverse. And they were not alone. Arranged in a silent, perfect circle were 12 other figures. Like Marcarita, they were all angels, each with the same twilight blue skin, stark white hair, and golden halo. Each carried a staff, and each possessed an aura of serene, bottomless power. There was the mischievous-looking Vados from Universe 6, he stern and scholarly Whis from Universe 7, the diminutive but imposing Kusu from Universe 10. They were the shepherds of the universes, the most powerful and knowledgeable beings in existence, save for the two who stood at the head of their circle. One was the Grand Priest. He appeared as a small, unassuming man with a gentle, placid smile and eyes that seemed to contain the wisdom of all time. His halo was more intricate, his presence more profound. He was the father of all angels, the right hand of the Omni King, and the being whose power was second only to the ruler of all. Standing beside him, however, was a figure Naruto did not expect. It was a second Grand Priest, identical in every way, a perfect mirror image. This was the Grand Priest from the future, summoned by the Omni King after the events of the Goku Black Saga. A testament to the complexity and dangers of temporal paradoxes. The presence of two of them signified a crisis of the highest possible order. Every single angel, including the two Grand Priests, had their serene, all-knowing eyes fixed on the three mortals who had appeared in their midst. The combined weight of their gazes was a physical pressure, a force of pure analysis that peeled back every layer of their being, from their genetic code to the faintest echoes of their souls. Helena, queen of Asgardia, who had faced down frost giants and cosmic horrors without a flicker of fear, felt a tremor of pure, instinctual awe. She gripped the hilt of her Galderblade, not as a threat, but as an anchor, a familiar comfort in the face of a power she could not even begin to comprehend. Kiyomi, the ghost of Shinski, instinctively tried to fade into the shadows, only to find that in this place of perfect light, there were no shadows to hide in. Her lifetime of stealth and subterfuge was rendered utterly useless. She felt naked, exposed, every one of her secrets laid bare. Only Naruto stood unbowed. His calm was not a facade, it was his nature. He met the gaze of the divine host without defiance, but with a simple, quiet equanimity. He was a rock, and they were the ocean. The ocean was infinitely more powerful, but the rock was not afraid of the water. It simply was what it was. Marcarita, the present Grand Priest's voice was not a sound, but a universal thought, a concept of gentle authority that permeated the very essence of everyone present. You have requested a council of the highest urgency, a measure not invoked since the multiversal erasure of the 6 extra universes. And you have brought guests. This is a profound breach of protocol. Marcarita bowed deeply, a gesture of utmost respect. My sincerest apologies, Father. But the nature of the threat is, I believe, a profound breach of reality itself. A threat that, I have come to realize, only these mortals are equipped to perceive and confront. A murmur, a soft, harmonious chorus of surprise, rippled through the assembled angels. Mortals, equipped to handle a threat that required a council of angels. The idea was ludicrous. We are aware of the anomalies, the future Grand Priest spoke, his voice identical to his counterparts, creating a strange, stereophonic effect. The void spots, minor, self-correcting statistical aberrations. The flow of time and reality is already weaving around them. They are of no consequence. With respect, honored Father, Marcarita countered, her voice firm. You are mistaken. They are not self-correcting. They are being anchored by my student. All eyes, which had briefly shifted to the Grand Priests, snapped back to Naruto. The intensity of their focus doubled. Your student, Whis of Universe 7 inquired, tapping his staff, a flicker of genuine, academic curiosity in his serene expression. You have taken a mortal as a student, Marcarita. How wonderfully unorthodox. And this one, his gaze swept over Naruto. His power level is curious. It is both infinitesimally small and infinitely deep. Like a perfectly sealed bottle containing an entire ocean. This mortal is Naruto Uzumaki, Marcarita announced, her voice ringing with a strange, new pride. He is the sole survivor of a pruned timeline, a universe erased by Lord Zeno. He did not survive through power or trickery. He survived because he had, through sheer will and circumstance, achieved a perfect, mastered state of ultra instinct. He did not dodge the erasure wave. He simply existed in a state that the erasure could not conceptually process. The silence that followed this statement was absolute. The very hum of the palace seemed to pause. The angels, beings who had witnessed the birth and death of galaxies, who understood the source code of reality, stared at the dusty man in orange and black as if he were a living ghost, a walking impossibility. A mortal who had mastered ultra instinct, on his own, and survived an omni-erasure. It was not just unorthodox, it was cosmic heresy. That would explain his unique ontological signature, the present Grand Priest mused. His placid smile finally showing a crack of profound surprise. He looked at Naruto not as a lesser being, but as a unique and fascinating specimen. He is, for all intents and purposes, a fixed point in reality. A man outside the flow of cause and effect. And it is this quality, Marcarita pressed on, seizing the opportunity, that makes him our only weapon against the silence. This enemy you perceive as a minor aberration, I have witnessed firsthand. It is an active, intelligent, and insidious force of anti-existence. It does not destroy, it unmakes. And it is a force that you, in your perfection, cannot properly perceive. Your divine energy exists as part of the grand song of creation. The silence is the negation of that song. You can feel its effects, but you cannot touch the thing itself. It is a fundamental blind spot in the divine senses. She projected a memory, an image from her staff, for all to see. It was the battle in the celestial spheres. They saw Helena's glorious, useless power. They saw Kiyomi's desperate, brilliant tactics. They saw Arya's fading song. And they saw Naruto, a silent, silver figure, standing against a tide of absolute nothingness. His mere presence a shield that the void could not breach. They saw the tendril of erasure dissolve against his hand. The angels were, for the first time in eons, collectively stunned into silence. They had the evidence of their own senses telling them the threat was minor. But they had the irrefutable visual evidence from one of their own showing a conceptual plague that could unravel reality, and a single, impossible mortal who was somehow immune. This enemy, the future Grand Priest said slowly, processing the new data. This silence. It seeks to return everything to the state of non-being that existed before Lord Zeno created the multiverse. It seeks to make it so that the multiverse never existed at all, Marcarita confirmed. It is the ultimate entropy. The final, perfect order of absolute zero. A grave seriousness settled over the council. This was a threat beyond any they had ever conceived. A god of destruction could destroy a universe, but it would still have existed. This enemy threatened to erase the very memory of existence itself. Why was I summoned here? Helena's voice suddenly boomed, rough and out of place in the serene hall. She had been silent long enough. She would not be a mere spectator. Why was she? She nodded towards Kiyomi. If this blonde-haired anomaly is your only weapon, what purpose do we serve? The present Grand Priest turned his gentle, all-knowing gaze upon her. An excellent and pertinent question, Queen of Asgardia. You were brought here because you, too, are an anomaly. You have touched the power that this enemy wields. In your battle, your Hamingja was nullified, your connection to your world, severed. You have felt the touch of the silence and survived. That gives you a unique perspective. He then looked at Kiyomi. And you, last daughter of the Uchiha. Your power, this, chakra, is a blend of spiritual and physical energy that is not native to this multiverse's design. It is a relic, an echo from a previous iteration of reality. It operates on a different set of rules. You, too, are an unknown variable in this equation. He then looked at all three of them, and then at Naruto. It seems, Marcarita, your student, has become a strange sort of nexus, attracting other paradoxes and anomalies to himself. He is a shepherd of broken pieces from forgotten games. What is your command, father? Vados asked, her playful demeanor replaced by a sober readiness. How do we fight an enemy we cannot see? The two Grand Priests exchanged a look, a silent communication that lasted an infinitesimal moment. Yet contained the weight of cosmic strategy. We cannot, the present Grand Priest stated simply. The angels stiffened. We cannot fight it, but they can. Our role is no longer to be the shepherds. It is to be the support staff. We must become the eyes, the transportation, the logistical core for a war we are not equipped to wage. His gaze swept over the council. Each of you will return to your universe. You will monitor for the appearance of null energy events with the utmost priority. You will no longer see them as aberrations, but as enemy incursions. When one is found, you will not engage. You will report. You will ferry our champions to the front lines. You will provide them with whatever knowledge, whatever resources, whatever support they require. He was effectively deputizing the three mortals, placing them at the head of a multiversal task force, with the angels themselves as their subordinates. The sheer, unprecedented nature of this command was staggering. And what of the gods of destruction? The supreme Kais? Whis asked. Surely they must be informed. No, the future Grand Priest said, his voice firm. Their power is a part of the system the silence seeks to erase. Their direct intervention would be like throwing gasoline on a fire. Their panic, their pride, it would create chaos that would only hasten the enemy's advance. For now, they must not know. This war must be fought in the shadows. By the shadows. The command was given. The strategy was set. The most powerful beings in existence had just been relegated to a supporting role, and the fate of L reality had been placed on the shoulders of a quiet man who had already lost one universe, a loud queen who had just discovered she was not invincible, and a silent ninja who had thought she was all alone. As the other angels began to silently acknowledge their new orders, Naruto stepped forward. "You're making a mistake," he said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the divine hum of the palace, drawing every eye. The present Grand Priest raised a delicate eyebrow. "Oh, a mortal who has existed in our reality for less than a standard week presumes to correct a strategy millennia in the making." There was no malice in his voice, only a genuine, academic curiosity. "You're treating this like a war," Naruto said, his blue eyes sweeping over the assembled divine beings. "You're thinking about logistics, and front lines, and champions. You think the enemy is an army that wants to conquer you. It's not. I've spent more time in its presence than anyone. I know what it is." "And what is it, Naruto Uzumaki?" the future Grand Priest asked, leaning forward slightly, his interest piqued. "It's a correction," Naruto said, the word landing with quiet, devastating force. "It's not a mindless plague. It's not a force of chaos. It's a force of absolute, perfect order. The order of non-existence. It believes that reality, that life, that us, we are a mistake. A messy, chaotic, illogical error in the perfect, silent code of the void. It's not trying to kill us. It's trying to fix us." He looked at the two Grand Priests, his gaze unflinching. "You can't fight that with swords and energy blasts. You can't outmaneuver it with strategy. You're trying to fight a mathematical theorem. The only way to win is to prove its premise is wrong. You have to prove that life, that chaos, that music and love and rage, that all of it is better and more beautiful than the perfect, elegant silence of nothing." He took a breath, the first sign of any emotion he had shown. It was a flicker of the passion, the unwavering, indomitable will of the boy he had once been. "I will fight your battles. I will hold your lines. But that is not how we will win. We will win when we find the heart of the silence, the mind behind the equation. And we show it the one thing that is more perfect than its logic, a reason to exist." The Grand Priest stared at him, their placid smiles gone, replaced by an expression of profound, unadulterated shock. He had not just offered a strategy. He had offered a philosophy. He had looked at the face of their ultimate, unknowable enemy and had not seen a monster to be slain, but a mind to be changed. It was the most audacious, most ridiculous, and most mortal idea they had ever heard. And in the silent, perfect, all-knowing heart of the multiverse, a seed of doubt was planted. Perhaps this dusty, impossible mortal was right. Perhaps the answer to the end of all things was not a grand display of divine power, but a simple, stubborn, and utterly illogical argument for the beauty of a flawed existence. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Heart of the Harem and the Bonds Forged. The Omni King's Palace, a realm of absolute authority and boundless power, had become a most unlikely home base. In the wake of Naruto's philosophical mic drop, the Grand Priests had granted them a private, sequestered wing, a bubble of reality Marcarita was permitted to customize for her champions. She had fashioned it into a perfect replica of her own Jade Pagoda domain, a tranquil island of serenity floating in a pocket of simulated space, a stark contrast to the divine, minimalist aesthetic of the palace proper. It was a haven, a place for rest and reflection between the increasingly frequent, frantic deployments to the crumbling edges of the multiverse. Days, weeks, months blurred into a strange, timeless rhythm of conflict and calm. They would be pulled through a portal by a grim-faced Whis or a flustered Vados to a world where the sky was bleeding into a silent void. Or a people were forgetting their own names as the silence consumed their history. Helena would unleash glorious, world-breaking power to carve firebreaks. Kiyomi would weave intricate, concept-to al seals to quarantine the metaphysical infection. Naruto would be the anchor, the immovable object against which the tide of nothingness would break, his silver aura a beacon of pure, stubborn existence. And Arya, from her healing celestial spheres, would lend her song, a thread of creative energy that flowed through their bonds, reinforcing their spirits across the vastness of space and time. It was in the moments between the battles, in the quiet sanctuary of the Jade Pagoda, that the true nature of their alliance was being forged. The shared trauma of facing oblivion, the reliance on each other's unique strengths, and the quiet, undeniable gravity of Naruto's own being had begun to weave their disparate souls together into a complex and beautiful tapestry. One evening, after a Ling 3-day campaign defending the memory banks of the universe 6-time patrol, they had returned, utterly drained. Helena, her Asgardian stamina pushed to its absolute limit, had collapsed onto an obsidian bench. Her Galderblade clattering beside her. Kiyomi, pale and trembling from the strain of weaving seals out of pure historical concept, was meditating by the crystalline spring, trying to recenter her fractured spirit. Naruto, who had spent 72 hours maintaining a constant state of mastered ultra instinct to anchor a collapsing timeline, simply stood at the edge of the pagoda, watching the simulated nebulae. His stillness a mask for a profound, soul-deep exhaustion. Marcarita approached him, her usual serene expression tinged with a deep, maternal concern. She held out a simple, porcelain cup filled with a steaming, iridescent liquid. "Drink." Her voice was a soft melody in his mind. "It is a restorative brewed from the tears of a joyous star. It will soothe the metaphysical strain on your soul." Naruto took the cup, his fingers brushing against hers. It was a fleeting, accidental touch, but in the heightened state of their shared existence, it sent a subtle tremor through them both. He drank. The liquid was warm, tasting of forgotten memories and a gentle, unconditional kindness. The profound weariness in him began to recede, replaced by a quiet warmth. "Thank you, Sensei," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You are pushing yourself too hard, Naruto-kun," she chided gently. "Even a fixed point can be eroded by a constant tide. Your ontological mass is not infinite. Every time you anchor a reality, a small part of your own certainty is expended. You are, slowly, spending the very essence of what makes you you." He looked down into the empty cup. "It's a price I have to pay. There's no one else who can." "You are no longer alone," she said, her voice soft but firm. She gestured with her staff towards the 2 other women. "They fight with you, they bleed with you, and they worry for you." As if on cue, Helena pushed herself up from the bench and strode towards them. Her usual boisterous arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, unshielded vulnerability. Her emerald eyes, usually burning with battle lust, were shadowed with a fatigue that was more than just physical. "She's right, you know," Helena said, her voice rough. She stopped before Naruto, her taller frame casting a long shadow over him. "I watched you today, anchoring the great cataclysm of planet Sadala. You were fading. Your light was dimming. I felt it." She reached out, her callow, used warrior's hand surprisingly gentle as she placed it on his shoulder. "You cannot be the shield for everyone, all the time. Sometimes, the shield needs a wall to rest against." Her touch was warm, grounding. It was the touch of a protector, someone who understood the burden of command, the weight of being the strongest. In that moment, she was not a queen addressing a strange warrior, she was a soldier speaking to her comrade. An equal. Her attraction to him, which had begun as a grudging respect for his impossible power, had deepened into something more. She saw in his quiet, unyielding strength a reflection of her own ideals. But stripped of the pride and arrogance, he was everything she aspired to be as a warrior, pure, efficient, and utterly reliable. Before Naruto could respond, a whisper of movement announced Kiyomi's arrival. She stood beside Helena, a silent shadow, her dark eyes holding an unnerving intensity. She had overheard their exchange. "The Valkyrie is correct," Kiyomi stated, her voice the soft hiss of a drawn blade. "Your energy signature became unstable. Your chakra pathways were showing signs of degradation. I began weaving a contingency seal to transfer me of the conceptual load to my own network, but the risk of catastrophic feedback was 93.6%. She looked at him, and for the first time, her face was not a mask of shinobi impassivity. It was an open book of desperate, clinical concern. "Do not force me to make that calculation again. Your survival is a tactical imperative." Her words were cold, analytical, yet the emotion behind them was a raging fire. Her bond with Naruto was forged in the shared ashes of their dead worlds. He was not just a commander or a comrade, he was her only living link to a past that had been stolen from her. The thought of losing him was not a tactical problem, it was an existential threat to her own fragile, recovering soul. He was the one who had told her she wasn't alone. His absence would be the ultimate, final loneliness. Suddenly, a fifth presence joined them. It was a shimmering, ethereal form, a being of light and sound. Arya. Her essence had projected itself from the celestial spheres, drawn by the emotional crescendo of the moment. He is the anchor, her voice sang in their minds, a melody of profound truth. But an anchor needs a chain. It needs a ship. Alone, it is us to heavy stone at the bottom of a silent sea. We are his chain. We are his ship. We must bear the load together. Her connection to Naruto was the purest of all. He had saved her world not with violence, but with the simple fact of his being. To her, he was a living song, a miracle of existence. Her love for him was a form of worship, a selfless, unconditional devotion to the one who had answered the silence with a note of hope. The four of them stood there: the angel, the queen, the ninja, and the celestial songstress. Four of the most powerful and unique female figures in the multiverse, their gazes, their hearts, their very beings focused on the quiet, dusty man who stood at the center of their circle. Naruto looked at each of them. At Marcarita, his teacher, the one who had pulled I am from his silent tomb and given him a new purpose, her intellectual curiosity now undeniably warmed by a deep, protective affection. At Helena, his rival, the proud queen who had found in him a strength that transcended her own, her warrior's respect blossoming into a fierce, passionate loyalty. At Kiyomi, his kindred spirit, the ghost who saw in him the last flicker of her dying world, her tactical reliance evolving into a desperate, profound attachment. And at Arya, the soul he had saved, whose love was as pure and as fundamental as the music of creation itself. He felt the intricate web of their emotions, their fears, their hopes, all centered on him. For the first time, he did not see it as a burden to be carried or a tactical situation to be managed. He saw it for what it was, a gift, a treasure more precious than any victory, more real than any reality he had saved. After an eternity of being the sole survivor, the lonely god of a dead universe, he was once again part of a whole. A genuine, warm smile spread across his face. It was not the ghost of a smile he had shown in Asgardia, nor the sad, empathetic smile he had given Kiyomi. This was a real smile, a smile that reached his eyes and filled them with a light that outshone his silver aura. It was the smile of Naruto Uzumaki, the boy who had once promised to carry all the hatred of the world and turn it into love. The man who had forgotten, but was now, finally, remembering how. All right, he said, his voice imbued with a new warmth, a new life. I understand. He looked at Helena. Thank you for being my wall. He looked at Kiyomi. Thank you for watching my back. He looked towards Arya's shimmering form. Thank you for being my song. And finally, he looked at Marcarita. And thank you, Sensei, for giving me a reason to fight for it all. He was not choosing one. He was not rejecting any. He was accepting them all. He was acknowledging the complex, unspoken, and deeply powerful bonds that had formed between them. It was not a harem born of conquest or lust. It was a fellowship forged in the face of oblivion, a complex equation of love, respect, and mutual survival. Helena's fierce expression softened, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. Kiyomi gave a single, almost imperceptible nod, but her dark eyes shone with a new, quiet light. Arya's luminous form pulsed with a joyous, triumphant chord. And Marcarita, the serene, detached angel, found herself smiling a genuine, unguarded smile, a sight perhaps not even the Grand Priest had ever witnessed. In the heart of the Omni King's palace, under the watchful, unknowing eyes of the gods, a new kind of power was being born. It was not the power to destroy universes or to anchor reality. It was the quiet, indomitable power of a handful of broken, impossible souls, choosing to be a shield for each other. The silence had a premise: that existence was a flawed, chaotic error. In that moment, in the unspoken love and loyalty of five disparate beings, Naruto had found his counter-argument. Existence wasn't an error, it was a symphony, and he was finally ready to be its conductor. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The penultimate silence and the all-out war. The peace was a fragile, beautiful lie, and it shattered without a sound. One moment, the five of them were sharing a quiet meal in the Jade Pagoda, a rare instance of normalcy in their strange, timeless existence. The next, the very air of the pocket dimension screamed. The simulated nebulae outside turned a violent, blood red. A single, piercing chime, a sound of absolute, ultimate alarm, echoed from the core of the Omni King's palace. It was a warning that had not been heard in a billion years. The Grand Priest appeared before them, not as a calm observer, but as a flicker of panicked energy. His placid smile was gone, replaced by a look of grim, cosmic urgency. His identical future self materialized a second later, their combined presence making the very fabric of the pagoda groan. It has begun, the present Grand Priest announced, his voice a tidal wave of thought that crashed over them. Not incursions, not breaches, a full-scale, coordinated invasion. Every universe, every timeline, simultaneously. A holographic map of the multiverse exploded into existence in the center of the room. It was a terrifying sight. The discrete, egg-like universes were no longer just peppered with black spots. Great, jagged wounds of absolute nothingness were tearing across their surfaces, like a divine tapestry being ripped to shreds by an unseen hand. From these wounds, the silent infection was not creeping. It was pouring, flooding the arteries of reality with pure, unadulterated non-existence. This was not a war of attrition. This was a final, overwhelming blitzkrieg. They use the smaller incursions to map our defenses, to learn our weaknesses, Kiyomi breathed, her mind instantly processing the tactical nightmare. They were never feints. They were reconnaissance. They know of us, Helena growled, her hand already gripping her galderblade, her body thrumming with a furious, golden light. They know we are the only resistance, and they have decided to overwhelm us with sheer, brute force. A fine strategy. Quote, the angelic network is in chaos, the future Grand Priest added, his gaze distant as he processed trillions of streams of data. Whis reports the destruction of the God of Destruction's temple in Universe 7. Vados reports the entire Sadala system has been silenced. The Kais are screaming, then they are not. The silence is not just erasing matter. It is erasing the divine. This was it, the main event. Naruto stepped into the center of the room, his calm a stark contrast to the cosmic panic unfolding around him. His blue eyes, honed by an eternity of watching the void, scanned the map. Seeing not chaos, but patterns. They're not attacking randomly, he stated, his voice cutting through the fear. They're targeting keystones, places of great power, great meaning, great creation. They're not just tearing the tapestry, they're pulling the threads that will cause the fastest unraveling. He looked at his companions, his gaze hard, his tone shifting. G from quiet survivor to resolute commander. We can't plug every hole. We have to defend the pillars before the whole roof comes down. Grand Priest, give me the four most critical fronts. The Grand Priest nodded, a flicker of relief in his ancient eyes at Naruto's decisive command. Universe 11. Your home, Queen Helena. The primary breach has opened directly above Asgardia's sky vortex. The enum, Y manifests as a cessation of motion itself. They are freezing your world into a perfect, eternal stillness. The ultimate insult to your warrior culture. Helena's eyes blazed. An attack on her home, on her very philosophy of life. They will learn what true motion is when my blade is lodged in their non-existent skulls, she snarled. Universe 7. The Grand Priest continued, a new tear appearing on the map over a beautiful, green world. The sacred world of the Kais. The breach there is more subtle. It is a conceptual virus, an anti-meme. It spreads not through destruction, but through forgetfulness. It is making the gods of creation forget the meaning of their own work. A war of information. Kiyomi's dark eyes sharpened. A logic plague. I can create a conceptual firewall. Isolate the corrupted data stream. The celestial spheres, the priest went on, pointing to the conceptual realm. They are the heart of creation's song. It has become the central battlefield. The enemy is manifesting as pure dissonance, anti-music, seeking to silence Arya's song at its source. I will not falter, Arya's voice sang in their minds, a clear, defiant chord from across the dimensions. The song will endure. And the fourth front? Naruto asked. The Grand Priest's expression became impossibly grim. He indicated a vast, empty space between the universes on the map. The world of void, the dimension used for the tournament of power. It is a place of pure potential, a blank canvas. They have torn the largest single wound in reality there. It is their primary staging ground, a beachhead from which they are pouring their main forces into the multiverse. It is guarded by their elite, beings of pure, negative law. Naruto's gaze was fixed on the world of void. That was the head of the serpent. All right, he said, the word ringing with absolute authority. Here's the plan. Helena, you take Asgardia. This is your world, your fight. Hold them. Don't just fight their stillness. Show your people the glory of motion. Be the fire that melts their ice. Helena slammed a gauntleted fist against her chest, a thunderous crack echoing in the room. Victory or Valhalla, she roared. Kiyomi, you go to the Kais. This is a battle of wits, of seals and symbols. They won't see you coming. Be the ghost in their machine. Protect the meaning of things. Kiyomi gave a single, sharp nod, her hand ALR. Edie forming the first sign for a stealth jutsu. Arya, you are the heart. You must hold the center. We will all be drawing strength from your song. Do not let them silence you. My voice will be your shield, was Arya's simple, powerful reply. Marcarita and I will take the world of void, Naruto concluded. We'll cut off the source. Grand Priest, get them to their battlefields. We're on the clock. It was not a request. It was a command, and for the first time, the Grand Priest, ruler of the angels, simply nodded and obeyed. With 4 simultaneous taps of his staff, 4 iridescent portals tore open, each leading to a different kind of hell. Helena charged through hers with a battle cry. Kiyomi vanished into hers without a sound. Marcarita and Naruto shared one last, determined look, and then plunged into the void. The war began. Asgardia, Universe 11. Helena emerged onto the rainbow bridge to a scene of nightmarish stillness. The glorious, golden sky vortex was frozen. The roaring waterfalls were silent. Solid sculptures of ice. Her mighty warriors, caught mid-swing, mid-roar, were trapped in fields of absolute stasis, their faces masks of frozen fury. From the breach in the sky, colossal beings made of a shimmering, heat-absorbing distortion descended. They were the golems of stillness. They did not attack. They simply walked, and everything in 100-yard radius around them ground to a perfect molecular halt. No, Helena's roar was a blast of pure, kinetic fury. She charged, a golden meteor of life against a tide of absolute zero. Her Galderblade slammed into the nearest golem. The creature did not shatter. It simply absorbed the kinetic energy, a small patch of its surface glowing dull red before fading. It had taken the force of a planet-shattering blow and simply stopped it. You want stillness, she screamed, her key flaring to an incandescent white. Then I will give you the motion of a supernova. She didn't try to break them. She began to pour raw, untamed energy into the very air. Into the frozen ground, into her trapped warriors, forcing the atoms to vibrate, to fight the encroaching cold. She was fighting entropy with pure, glorious, inefficient passion. The sacred world of the Kais, Universe 7. Kiyomi materialized in a shadow behind the Elder Kai, who was staring intently at a blade of grass, a look of profound confusion on his face. The beautiful, idyllic world was silent. The other Kais were wandering aimlessly, their halos flickering. She could see the infection. Faint, gray threads of unlogic weaving through the divine architecture, erasing purpose. She drew her kodachis, not to cut, but to channel. This was not a place for bloodshed. It was a place for surgery. Fuinjutsu. Shika no Kekai. Sealing technique. Barrier of thought. She whispered. Purple lines of pure chakra shot from her fingertips, not touching the physical world, but weaving into the conceptual reality. She began constructing a firewall, a barrier of pure, logical purpose around the core concepts of creation, life, and order. She saw the meme virus, a fractal of beautiful, complex, and utterly meaningless data, trying to breach her defenses. She was a single hacker holding back a DDoS attack that was targeting the operating system of the gods. The celestial spheres, Arya sang. Her voice was the only thing holding her crumbling reality together. Before her, the dissonant choirs manifested, beings of shimmering black sound waves, their forms constantly shifting. They did not roar or scream. They emitted a perfect, all-consuming hum, a single, monotonous frequency that was the auditory equivalent of a black hole. It was the sound of the end of music. Arya countered not with volume, but with complexity. She wove harmonies of impossible beauty. Melodies that told the story of the first star, the first love, the first hope. It was a desperate, beautiful battle between a single, complex song and a simple, perfect silence. The world of void, Naruto and Marcarita emerged into an endless, featureless expanse of black. And before them was the tear. It was a wound in the skin of nothingness, a horrifying, multicolored vortex of raw, uncreation. From it stepped three figures, the archons of entropy. They were not made of matter or energy, but of pure, terrifying principle. The first, a shifting, geometric shape, radiated an aura of pure chaos. Marcarita's staff sputtered, its divine order struggling to maintain itself. Causality failure, she grunted, her knuckles white on her staff. My attacks may heal it. A defensive spell may amplify its power. The rules are broken. The second, a figure that looked like a man made of television static, projected a wave of pure psychic despair. You are pointless. Your struggle is a forgotten footnote in a book that was never written. Surrender. It was a wave of narrative collapse. The third and most terrifying was a perfect, black sphere that simply floated, doing nothing. But as Naruto watched, he felt his own mastery of Ultra Instinct begin to fray. The connection between his mind and body was becoming indistinct. The sphere was an archon of disconnect. Marcarita, reassert the laws. I'll handle the narrative, Naruto commanded, his mind already adapting. He flared his own ki, not as an attack, but as a story. He projected his own will, his own unbreakable purpose, pushing back against the wave of despair with the sheer, stubborn force of his own life's narrative. I am Naruto Uzumaki. I do not surrender. My existence is my reason. Marcarita raised her staff, its blue orb glowing. By the will of the Omni King, I declare that A plus B shall equal C. She proclaimed, slamming her staff. Down on the void, a shockwave of pure, divine law erupted from the impact, a rip. PLE of order pushing back against the archon of chaos, forcing its shifting form to momentarily stabilize. The battle for all of reality was joined on four fronts, by four champions and an angel, each fighting not just for survival, but for the very meaning of the word. The air crackled with the clash of abstract concepts, the roar of a Valkyrie fighting stillness itself, the silent hum of a ninja saving the minds of gods. The desperate song of a celestial being, and the unbreakable will of a mortal who stood against the end of all stories. This was the penultimate silence, the final, desperate roar of life before the fall of night. Chapter 9 End. The End. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.